When the sky cracked open above the city, everyone stopped pretending life was normal. I was standing in the middle of a crosswalk with a half-cold coffee in one hand and a cracked phone in the other, watching cars freeze in the street like toys someone forgot to wind up. The traffic lights flickered from green to red to colors I had never seen before. Then a black window appeared in front of my face, clean and sharp, like somebody had cut a rectangle out of reality. Choose one starter equipment. That was all it said. No explanation, no warning, no soft introduction, just one sentence floating in the air while the whole city groaned like a sleeping beast turning over. The window shattered into silver dust, and suddenly the street was gone. I landed in a white room so bright it made my eyes sting. Thousands of people appeared around me, stumbling, screaming, calling for families, grabbing their own faces to make sure they were still alive. Above us, weapons hung in the air in shining circles, swords wrapped in lightning, spears with dragon heads carved into the blades, shields covered in glowing runes, rings that burned blue. Capes that shed sparks like falling stars, armor sets that looked like they belonged to angels who had a serious anger problem. People panicked for exactly 3 seconds. Then the greed kicked in. The first guy jumped for a sword as tall as he was, and the second his hand touched the grip, thunder exploded across the room. Another woman took a golden bow, and light wings spread from her shoulders. Someone grabbed a black ring, laughed like a maniac, and vanished into smoke for 1 second before coming back with purple flames in his eyes. A teenager picked a hammer with a head bigger than a microwave, swung it once, and knocked himself flat on his back. Everyone was fighting over the obvious treasures. And I was late. I had never been the fastest guy in any room, not at work, not at school, not even when free pizza arrived. So by the time I pushed through the crowd, the legendary stuff was already gone. People were raising weapons and showing off floating stats, and I was left staring at a few sad items drifting near the back wall. A cracked wooden spoon, a pair of green socks, a chipped cup, a rope with knots in it, and one plain brown belt. I waited for the belt to transform. It did not. I waited for a hidden aura. Nothing. I touched it and a tiny window opened. Comfortable fit. That was it. Not plus strength, not plus agility, not Dragon Slayer, not Moon Emperor, comfortable fit. Someone behind me laughed so hard he almost choked. He had a sword made of red crystal and was already posing like the poster boy for a game I would never play because the cash shop would ruin it. The crowd noticed my hand on the belt. And when a crowd that's scared starts laughing, they laugh too loudly because it makes them feel safe. I heard every joke, the apocalypse started, and I picked office casual. I was about to defeat monsters by keeping my pants up. Maybe my final skill would be belt discount. Somebody told me to try strangling a slime with it. Somebody else told me at least I would die with a comfortable waist. I almost let go. But all the better items were gone, and the white room was fading around the edges. A timer appeared above us, counting down from 10. I grabbed the belt, pulled it off the air like it was hanging from an invisible hook, and wrapped it around my waist. It fit perfectly. That made me even angrier. The room collapsed into light. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the middle of a town square that did not exist anywhere on Earth. It had stone streets, wooden shops, tall watchtowers, and a massive fountain filled with water that glowed under the sun. Beyond the walls, a forest stretched so far it looked like a green ocean. Above the gate, another black window floated. Safe zone, Ashford. Monsters cannot enter. Player combat is forbidden inside the inner wall. I barely finished reading before the crowd poured in around me. Players cheered, cried, cursed, compared weapons, and ran toward the shops. I stood still with my plain belt and the dumbest expression on my face. Then I tried to buy bread. That was when my life stopped making sense. The merchant behind the counter looked past me. I said, "Hey, 1 loaf." He kept wiping the table. I waved my hand in front of his face. "Nothing." I leaned over the counter. "I'm standing right here." His eyes drifted around me like I was smoke. He turned to the guy behind me and said, "Next." The guy walked straight into my shoulder, cursed at the air, and looked confused when his body bounced sideways. I raised both hands. He stared through me, not at me, through me. His eyes moved over my face, lost focus, and slid away. My first thought was that I had died. My second thought was that being dead made shopping annoying. I ran to the guards. 2 big men in iron helmets stood by the fountain. I shouted at them. One scratched his beard, the other yawned. I grabbed the first guard by the sleeve, and he flinched because he could feel my hand, but the moment he looked down, his eyes refused to lock onto me. People could touch me. People could hear me. But they could not notice me with their eyes. Not really. Their gaze hit me, slipped, and forgot what it was looking for. The belt was not hiding my body, it was making me unimportant to vision itself. I found out the dangerous way. Outside the bakery, 3 players with shiny starter weapons cornered a thin guy carrying a cloth bag. He had the look of people who discovered the apocalypse, removed customer service, police reports, and consequences from their personal universe. The biggest one had a flame axe and a grin full of bad ideas. I was still mad, still confused, and still holding bread I had taken because the merchant ignored me so hard he forgot to charge me. The axe player shoved the thin guy against the wall, dropped the food. I walked up beside him and whispered into his ear, "Your haircut lost a fight with a lawn mower." The man screamed. Not a brave scream, not a battle cry, a full, broken, haunted house scream that made 3 pigeons explode off the roof. He spun around with the flame axe, saw nothing, swung anyway, and cut a burning line through the bakery sign. The guards moved instantly. Inside the safe zone, player combat was forbidden. The moment the axe struck town property and almost hit a civilian, blue chains shot from the stones and wrapped around his wrists. His friends backed away. He kicked and shouted that a ghost insulted him. No one believed him. I stood 2 feet away, chewing stolen bread, and understood something important. I had not picked the weakest item. I had picked the funniest one. And in a world full of glowing weapons, funny could become terrifying. The first day was chaos. People rushed out to kill low-level monsters and came back bleeding, bragging, or not at all. The legendary weapon players acted like they were chosen by fate. The rest of us learned that starter equipment did not replace common sense. I learned faster than most because my belt punished stupidity in other people. At first, I tested small things. I stood in front of players and made faces. Nothing. I balanced an apple on my head and walked through a crowded market. People bumped into me, apologized to the empty air, then forgot why they apologized. I stood behind a magic ring user while he explained his fire spell to a group of impressed players, then moved his hand slightly before he cast it. The fireball shot backward into a horse trough. He blamed the horse. But the belt had limits. If I made too much noise, people turned toward me. They still could not focus on my shape, but they knew something was there. If I touched someone hard enough, they could grab me by instinct. If I carried something too big, they could see the thing floating, even if their eyes slid away from the person holding it. And when I removed the belt, everyone saw me normally. That part hurt my pride more than it should have. With the belt on, I was a supernatural blind spot. With it off, I was just Jonah, the idiot who chose a fashion accessory during the end of the world. The mockery followed me whenever I let myself be seen. Players pointed, players laughed. A guy with a holy shield asked if I needed help tightening my legendary pants. A girl with lightning boots ran circles around me and said I should upgrade to suspenders. I smiled because I had already stolen the spare laces from her boots and tied them together in a perfect knot. She face-planted 5 seconds later. That was the first time someone called me cursed. It felt better than being called useless. By sunset, the town bell rang, and a new objective appeared over the square. Clear the northern borough before dawn. Failure penalty, monster wave at first light. Brave players cheered. The smart players got quiet. The legendary weapon crowd formed groups and marched toward the north gate like a parade of overconfident fireworks. I followed them with my belt on, walking between people who never looked down. Northern Borough was not a cave. It was a wound in the earth. Roots twisted around the entrance like fingers, and the air smelled like wet dirt and old blood. Little goblin-like monsters crawled out in packs, fast and ugly, holding bone knives. The sword players rushed in first. They did fine until the floor traps started. A glowing sword does not help when the ground opens under your feet. People screamed, shields slammed, fire spells lit the tunnels and woke up everything inside. Main group broke into 3 messy lines, and nobody listened to anybody because every player with a legendary weapon thought the weapon came with a leadership certificate. I walked around the first trap because I watched 3 people fall into it. Then I walked around the second because the goblins were too busy staring at the loud people. By the time the front line reached the first chamber, half of them were exhausted. A nest of goblins swarmed from the walls. The legendary sword guy who had laughed at me in the white room swung his red crystal blade and cut down 5 monsters in one attack. Then 6 more jumped on his back. He shouted for help. Nobody heard him over the noise. I picked up a bone knife from the floor, stepped behind the goblins, and started cutting belt loops. Not monster belt loops, player belt loops. I yanked pouches open, dropped shiny monster lure powder on the ground, kicked it toward the goblin nest, and watched the little monsters go insane. They abandoned the players and chased the scent straight into a pit trap. One after another, they dove in like ugly green coins falling into a fountain. The front line stared at the empty chamber, confused. The red sword guy panted. Did my aura scare them? I almost swallowed my tongue, trying not to laugh. Deeper inside, the burrow boss waited. It was a fat creature with 6 arms, a headpiece made of broken jawbones, and a club that looked like a tree trunk with hatred issues. The players charged. The boss smashed the floor. Everyone scattered. I did not attack it. I walked behind it and loosened the straps on its jawbone headpiece. Then I tied the headpiece to the hanging root above its head. When the boss lunged, the headpiece caught. Its head snapped back. The 6 arms windmilled. The club flew out of its grip, bounced off the wall, and crushed the monster's own foot. The players saw a boss suddenly slapstick itself into disaster. I saw opportunity. The red sword player leaped with a dramatic shout, aimed at the boss's neck, and missed because the boss hopped backward screaming about its foot. His sword buried itself in the wall. A holy shield player tried to body slam the boss, slipped on goblin powder, and hit the red sword player instead. The boss swung at both of them. I shoved a fallen shield under its other foot. The boss slipped. It fell on its own club. A damage number bigger than my rent exploded above its head. The chamber went silent. Then the system announced the clear reward. Contribution calculated. Most valuable player, unknown. The reward chest opened in front of nobody. Everyone stared. I walked up, opened it wider, and looked inside. Gold potions, a black buckle with tiny silver teeth. The moment I touched the buckle, my belt warmed around my waist. Skill acquired, silent buckle. My breathing vanished. Not stopped, vanished. My steps became soft. My clothes stopped rustling. Even when I snapped my fingers, the sound died against my skin like it had been caught under a blanket. That was the second time I realized I had not picked an item. I had picked a disaster waiting to learn new tricks. When we returned to Ashford, everyone argued about the unknown reward. The legendary players accused each other. The red sword guy claimed his final attack made the chest glitch. The holy shield player said he created the opening by bravely falling in the perfect direction. I stood in the fountain, invisible and silent, wearing the new buckle, and poured cold water down the back of every liar's shirt one by one. By morning, the town had rumors. A ghost lived in the safe zone. The ghost hated bragging. And the ghost had excellent aim. I should have been careful after that. I was not. Power makes people stupid, and hidden power makes people creative in the worst possible way. I spent 2 days testing the belt until I understood its shape. I could carry a dagger if I kept it close to my body, and people ignored the slight blur unless they were already suspicious. I could move small items while people watched, and their brains filled in excuses. A coin rolled away because of wind. A cup slid because the table was uneven. A pouch vanished because maybe it had never existed. I became the patron saint of inconvenient timing. When a player tried to charge new arrivals for fake protection, I moved his chair 3 inches back every time he sat down. After the 4th fall, he confessed to 3 scams because he thought a curse wanted honesty. When a fire cloak player threatened a merchant for cheaper potions, I dipped the end of his cloak in a bucket. He spent 10 minutes posing dramatically while smoke hissed behind him. When 2 sword users dueled outside the gate for attention, I tied their scabbards together. They walked in opposite directions and both lost. It was childish. It was beautiful. Then I saw the bodies. Beyond the western road, past the safe zone boundary, the game did not care how players treated each other. A group of player killers had built a camp in an old orchard. They did not fight monsters for loot. They waited for tired players to return from hunting, ambushed them, stole everything, and left them tied to trees as bait. Their leader was named Trevor. I learned his name because he said it too often. Trevor had chosen a chain blade, a long black weapon that moved like a snake and cut like a saw. He wore no heavy armor, just dark leather and a smile that looked practiced in front of broken people. He had maybe 20 followers, but most were cowards with sharp weapons. They laughed when prisoners begged. They made bets on which monster would arrive first. I stood in the middle of their camp with my belt on, silent as dust, and felt my jokes die in my throat. There are moments when being invisible stops feeling funny. There were 5 prisoners that night, hands tied behind their backs, mouths dry, eyes wide. One of them was a broad-shouldered player with a wooden club and a bruised face. His name was Owen. I only knew that because he kept whispering it to himself, like he was trying not to forget who he was. Trevor sat by the fire, sharpening his chain blade. At dawn, we moved closer to the east gate. More traffic, more food, more toys. His followers cheered. I walked behind him and placed a stolen goblin lure pouch inside his boot. Then I untied the prisoners. One by one, I cut their ropes with a bone knife. I pressed a finger to Owen's lips when he gasped. He stared straight through me, but he understood enough to stay quiet. I guided them behind a cart, opened the supply chest, and handed Owen a club. Then I went to the monster cages. Trevor's group had trapped little burrow beasts for torture and bait. They were angry, hungry, and stupid. A dangerous combination, but useful if pointed correctly. I opened every latch. Silent Buckle swallowed the noise. The beast smelled the lure in Trevor's boot. The first one launched itself across the camp like a furry cannonball. Trevor stood up just in time to get bitten on the ankle. He shouted, his followers jumped. The prisoners ran. The beasts poured from the cages, chasing the scent like tiny demons with personal grudges. Trevor swung his chain blade, but I had already looped one link around the leg of his chair. His first dramatic attack yanked the chair into the fire. The fire jumped to the cart. The cart rolled downhill. I may have pushed it. The camp became a festival of screaming idiots. Player killers tripped over their own traps. Monsters chased Trevor in circles. Owen clubbed one follower in the stomach, grabbed a bag of stolen gear, and ran for the road with the others. I stayed behind. Because chaos is not justice. Chaos is just the door opening. I dragged 3 unconscious player killers by their ankles to the safe zone boundary. It took forever. They were heavier than their morals. When they woke up, I removed my belt and stood 10 feet in front of them. They saw me. I waved. Then I put the belt back on. They screamed and attacked the empty air, stumbling across the blue line into Ashford's inner road. The guards saw armed players chasing nothing, swinging wildly at citizens. The safe zone chains erupted. By sunrise, half of Trevor's camp was in the town jail. Trevor escaped. That bothered me. But Owen found me near the fountain later, not found me exactly. He stood nearby and said, "I know you're around, ghost guy." I took off the belt. He jumped, then tried to pretend he had not jumped. His face was bruised, his lips split, but he grinned like someone who had just discovered the world still had surprises worth living for. "You're the belt guy," he said. I said I prefer ghost guy. He looked at my waist, then at my face, then back at my waist. They laughed at you. People laugh at seat belts too, until they fly through a windshield. Owen snorted. He was not a genius, but he had a good heart and the kind of courage that survived fear instead of pretending it did not exist. He wanted to follow me. I told him no. I worked better alone. Also, he had the subtlety of a dropped piano. But he became useful anyway. Owen was loud. I was not. That combination could ruin lives. The next objective appeared that afternoon. Escort supply wagons through the dusk road. Reward increases with survival rate. The legendary weapon groups formed teams again. After the burrow, they were more careful, but not more humble. A woman named Grace organized the strongest group near the east gate. She had chosen a silver spear that unfolded into 3 floating blades when she spun it. She did not brag. She watched everything. That made her dangerous. Grace noticed the pattern before most people. Something helped us in the burrow, she said to the crowd, something we could not see. Everyone got quiet. I stood behind her, eating another unpaid apple. Her eyes moved over the space near me and narrowed. For half a second, I thought she saw me. She did not, but she saw the absence. She saw people unconsciously walking around the same patch of air. She saw the apple bite floating too close to my face. I stopped chewing. Grace smiled slightly. Whoever you are, stay out of my formation unless you plan to help. That was the first time someone respected the invisible part of me more than the visible one. So naturally, I helped in the most annoying way possible. Dusk road cut through a valley filled with tall grass and broken stone arches. The wagons rolled slowly. Monsters stalked us from both sides, long-legged things with mouths that opened sideways. The players formed a defensive ring, Grace at the front, Owen near the rear swinging his club like he was mad at the concept of air. The first ambush came from above. Monsters dropped from the arches, aiming for the wagon drivers. I climbed onto the lead wagon, grabbed a sack of flour, and threw it into the air just as they fell. Silent Buckle hid the toss. Monsters hit the flour cloud, came out white and blinking, and the players finally saw them. Grace stabbed 3 before they landed. Owen shouted, "Flower ghosts." The second ambush came from underground. The grass rippled. I could not stop the monsters from bursting out, but I could decide where they burst. I ran ahead, placing meat chunks from the wagon in a perfect line toward a sinkhole. Monsters followed the smell under the soil. When they erupted, they came up beneath the wrong wagon. The empty decoy wagon. It collapsed into the sinkhole, taking 12 monsters with it. The drivers cheered. The players called it luck. Grace looked at the untouched supplies, then at the flour still drifting through the air and said nothing. The final attack was not monsters. It was Trevor. He appeared on the ridge with the rest of his player killers, chain blade coiled around his arm. He had escaped the orchard with burns on his sleeve and hatred in his eyes. He did not know my name, but he knew something invisible had humiliated him, and men like Trevor cannot stand being laughed at by a thing they cannot stab. His group rolled boulders down the slope. The players shouted and scattered. The wagons could not move fast enough. Grace tried to cut the first boulder with her spear, and she cracked it, but the pieces kept falling. I did the dumbest smart thing of my life. I took off the belt, right in the middle of the road. Trevor saw me. So did everyone else. For one bright, horrible second, the whole battlefield looked at the guy with the plain brown belt standing in front of an avalanche. Then I put the belt back on and sprinted. Trevor lost his mind. There, kill him. His player killers fired arrows, knives, spells, everything at the spot where I had been. Their attacks followed the memory of me, not the reality. I ran between the wagons, silent, invisible, dragging a coil of rope behind me. Arrows struck the rope. Fire bolts burned it. A wind blade sliced it in half. All of that force snapped the rope tight around the front axle of a broken wagon. The wagon jerked sideways. Its cargo of iron pots spilled across the road. The falling boulder hit the pots, bounced, rolled into the next boulder, and changed direction by inches. In normal life, inches do not matter much. In an apocalypse game, inches are where miracles rent apartments. Boulders smashed into each other, shattered, and rained harmlessly into the valley. Grace understood first. She raised her spear and led a counterattack up the ridge. Owen followed, screaming something about kitchen supplies. Trevor's group broke formation. They had expected panic. Instead, they got a spear storm, a club charge, and one invisible man tying their shoelaces together at high speed. Trevor escaped again by cutting down a tree and sliding into the ravine like a villain who had practiced dramatic exits. But his followers did not. The wagons reached Ashford with full supplies. The reward window opened. Most players got coins, potions, experience. I got a narrow gray strap that seemed to weigh less than air. Skill acquired, weightless strap. My footprints disappeared. Not just sound, not just attention. My presence stopped leaving proof on the ground. Mud stayed smooth. Snow would not bend. Dust would not stir unless I wanted it to. Owen found me after the reward and stared at my feet. That is unfair, he said. I said I survived a boulder avalanche with cookware. Fairness left town yesterday. By the third week, Ashford changed. People stopped laughing at the belt guy. They still laughed when I showed up visible, but it was nervous laughter now, the kind that checks behind itself afterward. The town had a market, a training yard, a jail, and a ranking board. My name sat near the bottom because the system had trouble deciding how to count me. Unknown kept appearing in events where I carried the fight. The ranking board hated that. It flickered whenever I walked by. That was how Harper noticed me. Harper ran a forge near the south wall. She had short hair, heavy gloves, and the calm expression of someone who could fix a sword and judge your soul in the same minute. She did not carry a legendary weapon. She had picked a plain blacksmith hammer, and everyone had ignored her until their glowing toys started cracking. The first time I entered her forge invisible, she threw a horseshoe at my head. I ducked. She said. Door opened, dust moved, floor did not creak. Either I have a ghost or someone is abusing a stealth item. I took off the belt. She looked me up and down. Of course it is the belt guy. I prefer ghost guy. No. That was Harper, no wasted words, no fake awe. She examined the belt with professional interest and personal disgust, as if it offended her that something so powerful looked like it came from a discount bin. She could not upgrade it directly. The belt rejected ordinary materials, but she could make attachments if I brought evolution pieces from dungeons. She also taught me a rule I should have known. A hidden blade is scary, she said, tightening the silent buckle. A hidden hand is worse. Do not focus on stabbing, focus on placement. Placement became my religion. A sword kills what stands in front of it. A belt lets you decide what stands where. Soon I was not sneaking through fights, I was designing them. When a group of player killers tried to ambush new players near the river, I placed monster eggs in their backpacks, then rang a dinner bell from 3 different directions. The river beasts came boiling out of the water. The killers ran into Ashford screaming, crossed the safe zone line with weapons drawn, and got chained in front of everyone. When a greedy party trapped weaker players inside a crystal mine and demanded all their ore, I walked in, moved the support crystals 1 inch at a time, and made the ceiling hum like it was about to collapse. The greedy party abandoned their loot and sprinted out. Then I carried the ore out while the rescued players thought the mine had blessed them. When a fire mage started charging people to pass a bridge he did not own, I stole every left shoe from his group while they slept. Next morning, monsters attacked, and the fire mage led a heroic retreat in a circle because nobody could run straight. Ashford's jail filled up. Guards started telling each other that evil people were developing a strange habit of attacking invisible threats in public. I never denied it. Next major dungeon opened under the old cathedral east of town, the Cathedral of Teeth, because subtlety had died with normal civilization. Its entrance was a mouth-shaped arch lined with stone fangs. The objective was simple. Retrieve the bell heart. Simple objectives are lies with good posture. Grace led the strongest team. Owen came because he said he owed the ghost one lifetime and apparently wanted to spend it near sharp things. Harper stayed in town but gave me 3 handmade clips, each holding a thin wire strong enough to trip a horse. The cathedral was vertical. We climbed down through broken pews, bone ladders, and chambers full of statues that turned their heads when nobody watched. That should have scared me more than it did, but by then I was used to being the thing nobody watched. The first room had a floor covered in sleeping monsters, big pale things with no eyes, all curled around piles of coins. A sword player stepped carefully, holding his breath. I walked across the room, invisible, silent, weightless, and stole 1 coin from every pile. The monsters woke up at the exact same time. Everyone froze. Then I dropped all the coins into 1 pile in the far corner. Monsters heard the clatter, smelled the metal, and crawled over each other to guard the wrong treasure. The party crossed safely while I lay on top of the coin pile like a king no one could see. The second room had a giant statue holding a scale. The door would open only when both sides balanced. Players argued about weight, coins, weapons, and sacrifice because people see a scale in a dungeon and immediately start inventing drama. I solved it by moving everyone's pouches one at a time while they argued. The door opened. They called it teamwork. I called it petty theft with architectural benefits. Deep below, we found the bell heart. It was not a bell. It was a living metal organ suspended in chains, beating slowly, sending waves of sound through the cathedral. Round it slept the guardian, a monster shaped like a priest made of knives. Its face had no eyes, but hundreds of tiny ears opened across its neck. My belt hid sight, sound, and footprints. But the guardian listened to heartbeat. Mine. The moment I stepped close, every ear turned toward me. The guardian unfolded. Its knife arms scratched the floor, and for the first time since I put on the belt, something looked in my direction without eyes. It screamed. Sound blasted through the chamber. Players hit the ground. Grace planted her spear and held on. Owen flew backward into a pile of bones and came out wearing a rib cage like a backpack. I should have run. Instead, I grabbed the bell heart chain. The guardian lunged at my heartbeat. I let it. At the last second, I removed the belt. The whole party saw me hanging from the chain, directly above the monster's head, grinning like an idiot. Then I put the belt back on and swung away. The guardian attacked the last place everyone had seen me. Its knife arms struck the chain. The bell heart dropped 5 feet and smashed into its own skull. The chamber rang. Sound hurt so badly I tasted metal. The guardian staggered. Grace saw the opening and threw her spear. The 3 floating blades unfolded midair and pinned the monster's arms to the wall. Owen, still wearing bones, charged with a yell and hit the bell heart like he was ringing the world's ugliest gong. I climbed onto the guardian's back and clipped Harper's wires around its neck. Then I jumped down and pulled. The wires tightened. The bell heart beat once more, sending a shock through the monster's metal body. It exploded into silver dust. The reward chest appeared. Everyone looked at Grace because she had led the team. The chest appeared behind me. Of course it did. Inside was a thin loop of dark leather, colder than the air. Skill acquired, forgotten waste. The description made my skin prickle. Name spoken while hidden fade from short-term memory. That sounded small until I used it. A player killer named Trevor became much less scary when his followers forgot his orders 3 seconds after he shouted them. The first test happened 2 nights later. Trevor returned with a smaller, meaner group. He did not attack Ashford directly. He waited near the southern quarry, where new players mined stone for upgrades. He captured 10 workers and demanded the town send him potions, weapons, and me. He did not know my name. So the demand was basically, send the ghost or we break people. Grace wanted to attack. Owen wanted to attack louder. Harper wanted to know why everyone's plan involved running toward a chain blade in poor lighting. I had a better idea. I walked into Trevor's quarry camp before sunset and listened. He was smarter now. His people stood back to back. They threw chalk dust around every few minutes to reveal invisible movement. They carried bells on strings. They had dogs trained to smell strangers. One follower even dragged a rake through the dirt to watch for footprints. 2 weeks earlier, that would have stopped me. Now Weightless Strap ignored the dust and dirt. Silent Buckle swallowed the bells. The dogs smelled me, growled, and then stared at the wall because their eyes could not agree with their noses. I stood beside Trevor while he explained his trap. If the ghost comes, wait until he touches the prisoners, then swing wide. He has to be close to interact. He can be hit. Good plan. Wrong opponent. I leaned to his ear and whispered, Trevor says drop your weapons. Forgotten Waste activated. His nearest followers blinked. One lowered his sword. Trevor turned, what are you doing? The follower looked ashamed. You said drop weapons. I did not. I moved to the other side of the camp. Trevor says release the prisoners. 2 people started cutting ropes. Trevor's face changed. Fear has many flavors. His was the spicy kind, mixed with humiliation. He began shouting orders faster. I followed him, repeating them wrong. Trevor says run in circles. Trevor says slap the guy next to you. Trevor says the chain blade is haunted. The camp dissolved. A disciplined group can survive a ghost. A paranoid group cannot survive a ghost, using their leader's voice like a broken flute. While they argued, I opened every cage, untied every prisoner, and stacked their stolen weapons on a quarry cart. Owen charged in from the road with 3 volunteers, making enough noise for a whole army. Grace took the ridge with her spear. The player killers saw enemies in front, betrayal beside them, and invisible nonsense everywhere else. Trevor attacked. Not them. Me. He threw his chain blade in a wide circle, aiming for every space near him. I ducked the first sweep. The second cut my sleeve. The third wrapped around my left arm. He smiled because he had finally caught the ghost. I smiled because his chain was attached to me. Then I stepped backward over the safe zone boundary line I had spent all afternoon moving him toward. The quarry road counted as protected territory after sundown because supply workers lived there. Trevor knew that. He just forgot while trying to kill an invisible man. Blue chains erupted from the ground and wrapped around his body. His chain blade dropped. I took off the belt so he could see my face. I was going to make you chase a chicken into town, I said, breathing hard because the chain had nearly broken my arm, but this felt cleaner. Trevor spat at me. It missed because I put the belt back on halfway through his mouth movement. The guards dragged him to jail. Ashford celebrated like the nightmare was over. I did not celebrate, because Trevor smiled before the cell door closed. And I had learned that people like him do not smile unless they think they left a knife somewhere. For a while, life almost felt like progress. The town grew, new safe routes opened, players stopped acting like starter equipment decided destiny. Harper's Forge became the busiest place in Ashford. Grace formed a proper defense group, not a guild exactly, more like people who were tired of dying stupidly. Owen became famous for surviving things that should have flattened him. And I became a rumor with a waist size. The Empty Player. I hated the name for about 5 minutes. Then I heard a player killer whisper it outside the gate and decide to go home instead of ambushing travelers, and I decided the name could live. My belt kept evolving, but not like normal gear. It did not gain raw damage. It did not show a big attack skill. Every upgrade made me less present and more unfair. A skill called Pocket Loop let me tuck small objects into a fold that nobody noticed. Not true inventory, more like hiding things in the idea of a pocket. I could store coins, potions, knives, keys, and once, very briefly, a live frog that came out offended but unharmed. Then came Double Tuck. That was the ridiculous one. If I placed an object halfway through a loop and distracted attention away from it, at the exact moment the system registered ownership, the belt produced a second temporary copy. It lasted 10 minutes unless used, broken, thrown, eaten, or exploded. Harper called it impossible. Owen called it snack science after I duplicated a meat pie and changed his religion. Double Tuck could not copy legendary weapons. It could not copy people. It could not copy living creatures except the frog incident, which I refused to discuss, but it could copy simple items. Rope, phaser, smoke bombs, potion bottles, iron spikes. One time an entire crate of onions. That last one was not planned, but it saved a dungeon. Hollow Mill opened during a rainstorm. It was a rotating tower full of grinding gears, grain spirits, and monsters made of wet straw. The objective was to stop the millstone before it crushed the town's water channel. Grace led the assault. Harper supplied tools. Owen came because he had heard there might be food inside. There was not food. There were onions. Thousands of them cursed and stored in sacks by the mill spirits. The straw monsters hated strong smells. I learned this when Owen tripped, fell into a sack, and the nearest monster recoiled like it had seen its taxes. I looked at the onion. I looked at the belts. I looked at the army of straw monsters blocking the stairs. Then I used double tuck until the room became a vegetable crime scene. Onions rolled down the stairs in waves. I duplicated sacks, split them open, kicked them into gears, stuffed them inside monster mouths, and launched them with slings made from Harper's wires. Straw monsters staggered around crying sap. Grace cut through them while trying very hard not to laugh. Owen wore onion skins like war paint and declared himself the farmer of doom. At the top of the mill, the boss waited inside the main gear, a giant scarecrow with a spinning saw wheel for a halo. It turned the entire room into a blender. Nobody could approach. The floor rotated. The walls shifted. The saw halo launched sparks. So I stopped trying to approach. I duplicated rope until I had enough to knit a terrible idea. Then I tied one end to the main gear, one end to the boss's ankle, and the middle to every loose sack of onions I could find. The boss spun faster. The rope tightened. The onions lifted. For 3 glorious seconds, the boss became the center of the world's dumbest tornado. Zack slammed into its face from every direction. Onion juice sprayed. The saw halo jammed. Grace threw her spear through the gap. Owen hit the emergency brake with his entire body. The millstone stopped 1 inch before crushing the water channel. Reward calculated. Most valuable player, unknown. I received a pale belt thread named Laughing Seam. It did not make me stronger. It made objects I moved seem natural for 1 extra second after I stopped touching them. 1 second is nothing. 1 second is enough to make a thrown knife look like it came from an enemy's hand. 1 second is enough to make a potion bottle appear to slip from a belt pouch. 1 second is enough to make a monster believe the person beside it kicked it in the teeth. The next month belonged to consequences. Trevor's old followers were not all in jail. Some had scattered into the woods, forming little packs of desperate, cruel players who thought the world owed them weaker victims. They stopped using big camps. They stopped gathering in obvious places. They learned to watch for flour, chalk, bells, dogs, and every trick I had used before. That made me proud. Not because they were smarter. Because every defense against me was a defense they were not using against everyone else. And I was not done learning. One group hid inside an abandoned bathhouse overrun by steam monsters. They lured players inside with fake treasure signs, then locked the doors and robbed whoever survived the heat. I walked through the steam unseen, duplicated their keys, and opened every door at once. The trapped players escaped. The steam monsters escaped too. The player killers ran outside screaming and slipped on soap I had spread across the courtyard. Guards arrived to find 8 armed criminals sliding in circles, attacking the air, and confessing to things nobody had asked about. Another group built a toll gate from fallen logs. They demanded potions from anyone crossing the forest trail. I waited until night, duplicated their own painted warning signs, and placed copies along every path pointing toward their camp with arrows labeled free loot. At dawn, every hungry monster in the area had followed the signs. The toll group ran into Ashford begging for jail because jail had walls. A third group tried to get clever. They set up an ambush where the ground was covered in dry leaves, hanging bells, and tripwire. They knew I could hide sound and footprints, but they assumed I still had to move through space like a normal person. They were half right. I had to move through space. But my belt did not say the space had to be the floor. I used pocket loop to store 10 iron hooks, climbed through the tree branches above them, and spent an hour tying every tripwire to every belt, pouch, sleeve, and weapon grip they owned. Then I threw 1 pebble. The entire ambush attacked itself. By the time I climbed down, 1 player was hanging upside down from a branch, 2 were tied back to back, 3 had triggered their own alarm bells, and the leader had somehow trapped his head inside a cooking pot. I took off my belt so they could see me. The leader shouted, "How are you this strong?" I pointed at my belts. He stared. Then he said the same thing everyone said eventually. "That thing is broken." He was right. But a broken thing in the right hands is just a key to doors nobody meant to open. The first time I lost was against Grace. Not in a real fight, in training. She asked me to meet her at the practice yard after midnight. I arrived invisible because arriving visible felt rude to my brand. She stood alone with her silver spear planted in the dirt. Lanterns burned around the yard, but their light left too many shadows. "I want to know if I can hit you," she said. "You cannot even see me." "I do not need to." That sounded arrogant. It was also true. Grace closed her eyes. I moved left, silent buckle hid my breath, weightless strap hid my steps, forgotten waist made my name slippery, laughing seam made a pebble roll naturally to distract her. Her spear tapped my shoulder. Not hard, just enough. I froze. She opened her eyes, again. I tried everything. I climbed the fence. I moved behind her. I tossed objects. I made Owen, who had been hiding badly behind a barrel, shout from the wrong direction. She hit me 5 times out of 10. That terrified me more than any monster. Grace was not seeing me. She was reading the world around me. Air pressure, grass bending near my invisible outline, the way insects changed their path, the way people unconsciously avoided empty spaces. You rely on people being stupid, she said. That has worked incredibly well. It will fail against someone patient. I hated hearing that. I hated more that she was helping me. So I trained. Not with swords, not with spells, with stillness. I learned to breathe only when wind moved. I learned to stand where attention already avoided looking, behind bright lights, beside loud people, near ugly statues, inside the awkward space between 2 arguing strangers. I learned that invisibility was not disappearing. It was becoming the thing nobody wanted to think about. Harper called it advanced lurking. Owen called it creepy. Grace called it survival. The system called it something else. Skill acquired, blind spot step. For 1 heartbeat, I could move from one ignored space to another without crossing the attention between them. Not teleportation exactly, more like skipping the part where eyes might have caught me. 1 heartbeat. 1 step. Completely unfair. The next big challenge arrived with the Crimson Garden. A red gate bloomed in the forest, opening into a dungeon where flowers had teeth and vines drank magic. The reward was a spring crystal that could protect Ashford's farms from monster blight. Without it, food would become the town's next enemy. Grace gathered a team. Harper gave me wire, glue, powder, and a small metal clip shaped like a laughing skull because she had apparently developed a sense of humor and did not want to admit it. Owen brought 3 clubs because he kept breaking them on purpose. We entered the gate with 30 players. 10 minutes later, the garden separated us. Walls of red vines shot from the ground, cutting the party into groups. Flowers opened overhead and sprayed pollen that made people see false paths. Monsters crawled under the roots. Every sound came back wrong. For most players, it was a maze. For me, it was a playground with murder plants. I used blind spot step between statues, tree trunks, and patches of shadow where the garden's attention did not settle. The monsters sensed movement, but their eyes slid off me. Their vines whipped at where I had been, and I used laughing seemed to make them believe other monsters had brushed them. Soon the garden was fighting itself. A thorn wolf pounced on a vine serpent because I tied its tail to the serpent's jaw. A giant flower bit a tree monster after I tossed nectar into its bark. A swarm of needle bees chased a pollen beast in circles because I duplicated the queen scent and painted it on the beast's back. Meanwhile, I found the trapped players and guided them out by dropping stones that seemed to roll naturally. They never saw me. They just followed a path of impossible luck. Then I found Grace. She was fighting the garden knight, a monster made of red petals layered like armor, carrying a thorn lance. Not heavy armor, more like a moving flower blade, elegant and horrible, its attacks bent around her spear. Every time she cut it, petals grew back. The spring crystal floated behind it, inside a cage of roots. I could have tried to steal the crystal. Instead, I stole the cage. Piece by piece, while Grace fought, I unhooked the root knots. Pocket loop swallowed thorns, double-tuck copied iron clips. I replaced living roots with fake rope, then with vines from another monster, then with one of Owen's spare belts because I was inspired. Grace noticed nothing because she was busy not dying. The garden knight noticed nothing because it had the attention span of a decorative blender. When the cage finally collapsed, the crystal dropped. I caught it, duplicated a red fruit the size of my fist, placed the fruit where the crystal had been, and walked away. The garden knight turned dramatically to protect its prize. It saw fruit. It paused. Grace took that pause personally and drove her spear through its chest. The knight exploded into petals. The reward window opened across the garden. Dungeon clear. Surviving players cheered. Grace looked at the fruit rolling out of the destroyed cage, then at the real crystal floating near my invisible hand. Jonah, she said quietly. My name did not fade because the belt was off for half a second. She remembered. I did not know how I felt about that. Back in Ashford, the spring crystal turned the farms green overnight. For the first time, people celebrated something I had done without needing to know I did it. Kids ran through fields that had been dead yesterday. Merchants cried over fresh vegetables. Players who had mocked me ate soup made possible by a plain brown belt and never knew. That should have been enough. But praise you cannot receive is a strange thing. I started taking the belt off more often. Not during fights, never that stupid, but in town sometimes. I let people see me near Harper's Forge. I let Owen drag me into meals where he told stories so exaggerated even I sounded cooler. I let Grace ask about my limits without making a joke every time. The mockery faded into caution. Caution faded into curiosity. Curiosity became requests. Could the empty player check a missing group? Could the empty player sneak into a dungeon and find the boss weakness? Could the empty player scare a bully straight? That last one became my specialty. I discovered evil people hate two things more than punishment: being confused and being watched by everyone while confused. A group of strong players began stealing monster cores from weaker parties outside the Eastfield. They were not killers, just cowards with good equipment. I followed them for one day and learned their pattern. They waited until others finished fighting, then swooped in and claimed the reward. So I created the world's smallest court of public opinion without using any court at all. At noon, they surrounded a tired party and demanded their cores. I used double tuck to copy every core in the bully leader's pouch, then dropped the copies at his feet. He accused the weaker party of stealing from him. Then I slipped real cores from his pouch into the hands of random bystanders. People shouted. He searched himself and found nothing. I placed a chalk mark on the back of his jacket that said I steal from tired people. He did not notice because eyes slid off my hand. Everyone else noticed the moment he turned. He denied it. I whispered, confess. He swung his sword at the voice. Inside the safe zone line. Blue chains, applause, lesson complete. Another time, a player with a lightning whip kept shocking people for laughs. I followed him into the training yard, tied his whip to the metal practice dummy, and whispered that his aim was terrible. He snapped the whip, the lightning bounced through the dummy, into his boots, up his legs, and made him dance so hard Owen thought it was a new combat style. He spent 3 days walking like furniture had betrayed him. Then came the night of the broken jail. Trevor had been quiet for too long. I knew he was planning something. I checked the jail often, slipping past guards, listening through walls. He sat in his cell smiling. No weapons, no followers, no visible hope. That was wrong. Men like Trevor do not need visible hope. They need one crack. The crack came during a monster storm. Black rain fell over Ashford, and creatures made of smoke slammed against the outer wall. The guards rushed to defend the gates. Players scrambled from bed. Bells rang. In the chaos, the jail stones began to glow red from inside. Not a hidden controller, not the system hunting me, just Trevor's hidden blade. He had swallowed a shard of monster crystal before capture and spent weeks feeding it blood from his own gums. Disgusting, effective. When the storm magic hit, the shard awakened and burned through his cell lock. By the time I reached the jail, half the prisoners were loose. Trevor stood in the corridor holding a stolen sword, his chain blade recovered by a follower who had hidden it inside a wall during the arrest. The guards were outnumbered. Criminals flooded toward the streets. I put on the belts. This was not a prank situation. This was surgery. Silent buckle, weightless strap, forgotten waist, blind spot step. I moved through the corridor like a mistake reality could not correct. First, I took keys from the jailer's belt and opened the prisoner storage room. Then I took every confiscated shield and leaned them against doors so they looked blocked from the other side. Laughing seam made each shield settle naturally. Escaping criminals slammed into them and thought guards had barricaded the exits. Second, I duplicated rope and tied it low across the hallways. Running prisoners tripped, rolled, collided, and stacked themselves into groaning piles. Third, I whispered Trevor's voice. Go left. Forgotten waste made the order fade, leaving only the instinct. Half his followers went left into the laundry room. Go right. The other half went right into the evidence cage. Then I locked both doors. Trevor felt it happening, not saw it, felt it, his plan unraveling around him thread by thread. He stopped in the main hall and closed his eyes, chain blade hanging loose. Jonah, he said. My stomach tightened. He knew my name now. He must have heard Grace say it, or Owen, or Harper. One mistake, one remembered sound, and the ghost had a handle. Forgotten waste did not erase names, people already anchored with hatred. Trevor smiled. I do not need to see you. He swung the chain blade in a wide spiral. The corridor became a storm of metal. I used blind spot step once, skipping from the shadow of a pillar to the ignored space behind a fallen bench. The chain still clipped my shoulder. Pain flashed white. I bit my tongue to keep silent. Trevor laughed there. He was learning. I hated that. I loved that. Because a smart enemy makes a better trap. I backed toward the front doors. He followed, swinging slow, patient arcs. Behind him, guards were freeing themselves and prisoners were getting tangled in my ropes. Outside, the storm hammered the town. The safe zone chains flickered but held. Trevor lunged. I took off the belt. He saw me standing in the jail doorway, blood running down my arm. There you are, he said. I smiled, here I am. He attacked. I put the belt on and dropped flat. His chain blade flew over me, through the doorway, and wrapped around the iron statue in the town square. The statue was part of the safe zone protection, and damaging it counted as attacking the town itself. Trevor tried to pull back. Too late. Blue chains erupted with twice the force I had ever seen. They wrapped his arms, legs, chest, and throat. His own chain blade tightened around the statue, pinning him in front of the entire square as players arrived to fight the storm. Everyone saw him. Everyone saw what he was. I stood up, visible now, because some moments deserve eye contact. Trevor snarled, "You hide because you are weak." I walked closer. No, I hide because people like you show their real faces when they think no one can see them. Then I turned away while the guards dragged him into a deeper cell under the forge. One Harper had reinforced herself. The monster storm ended before dawn. Ashford survived. The jail did not break again. And for the first time, when I walked through the town square without the belt, nobody laughed. They stared. That felt worse. Respect is heavier than mockery. Mockery bounces off if you are stubborn enough. Respect sticks. It asks you what you plan to do next. I did not know. The system helped by dropping a nightmare on us. Black Tower appeared beyond the northern forest, tall enough to split the clouds. It had no doors at ground level, only a spiral path wrapping around the outside, broken by platforms, gates, and boss arenas. A window appeared above every safe zone in the region. Ascend the Sky Needle. Top floor reward, City Anchor. Failure to claim within 30 days, roaming calamity released. City Anchor meant Ashford could expand its protection, secure farms, roads, and outer settlements. A roaming calamity meant something huge and angry would wander the region until everything became a footnote. So everyone prepared. Legendary weapon users sharpened blades, spell users practiced formations, Grace organized teams, Harper worked until sparks burned holes in her gloves. Owen trained by letting people hit him with padded clubs because he said pain was just information that shouted. I trained differently. I went through every previous dungeon route and collected nonsense. Rope, chalk, nails, hinges, empty potion bottles, sticky sap, bell clappers, feather bundles, smoke pellets, onion powder because history matters. I copied what I could with double tuck and hid the rest in pocket loop. Harper looked at my pile and said, "You are going to fight a tower with garbage." I said, "It is curated garbage." She added 3 spring-loaded clips to the pile. Grace asked for my plan. I told her the truth. Everyone else is going to climb the tower. I'm going to make the tower regret having objects. The first floor of the Sky Needle proved me right. The path lifted above the forest, a stone spiral wide enough for 50 players. Wind screamed from below. Flying monsters circled the platforms. Every step was visible from the ground, which made normal stealth useless. Good thing I was not normal stealth. First boss arena held a giant armored beetle with crystal wings. Not a person in armor, not a rival, just a bug the size of a bus with a face like a shovel. Its shell reflected attacks. Swords bounced. Spells scattered. The more players hit it, the faster it charged. Grace tried piercing the joints. It folded its legs tight. Owen tried hitting the face. The face hit back. I walked under the beetle. Nobody looks under a giant beetle, not even the beetle. I used Harper's clips to attach 6 duplicated smoke pellets to the inside of its wing joints. Then I tied a wire from each clip to one of Owen's dropped clubs. When the beetle charged, I moved the club 2 inches into its path. It stepped on the club. The wires pulled. Smoke exploded under its shell. The beetle panicked, opened its wings, and revealed the soft crystal roots beneath. Grace's spear flashed. 30 players attacked the same spot. The beetle shattered into blue glass. The ranking board flickered. Unknown contribution, excessive. I took that as a compliment. The second floor was a maze of floating doors. Each door led to a random platform. Players kept getting separated, then reappearing behind monsters or above holes. The obvious solution was mapping. The better solution was theft. Every door had a brass hinge that changed shape depending on its destination. I removed the hinges. The doors stopped randomizing. Players called it a lucky stabilization event. Harper later called it vandalism with benefits. The third floor had a boss that split into smaller versions when damaged, not copying players or moves, just dividing like a terrible worm with ambition. The strong parties kept cutting it and making the problem worse. I solved it with jars. Every time a smaller worm split off, I guided it into an empty potion jar using food scent and closed the lid. Then I duplicated the jars to make decoys, stacked them in a circle, and watched the main worm get confused about which part of itself was real. While it hesitated, Grace burned the core with a spear technique she had been saving. Owen tried to keep one jar as a pet. I told him absolutely not. He named it anyway. It escaped and bit him. That was not one of the important characters, that was a lesson. By the 7th floor, the tower stopped feeling like a dungeon and started feeling like a machine built to grind arrogance into dust. Every floor punished direct power. Every floor rewarded calm observation. Players who had once mocked me began asking where to stand before fights. They did not see me while I worked, but they trusted the results. Trust is dangerous. It makes people wait for miracles. On the 8th floor, waiting nearly killed them. The arena was a ring of stone suspended in open sky. The boss was a wind serpent, transparent except for glowing bones. It did not need eyes. It sensed pressure changes. Every invisible step I took bent the air. Every breath betrayed me. The serpent struck me before I got within 10 feet. Its tail slammed into my ribs and threw me across the arena. I hit stone, rolled, and nearly slid off the edge. For 1 second, everyone saw me because the impact loosened the belt. The players froze. The empty player could blade. The serpent turned toward me again. Grace shouted, but the wind swallowed her voice. Owen ran, too far away to help. I tightened the belt with shaking hands and forced myself up. Hiding from eyes did nothing. So I hid inside attention. The serpent sensed pressure changes. Fine, I would give it too many. I ripped open every feather bundle and pocket loop and used double tuck until feathers filled the air. Then I threw smoke pellets, flour packets, onion dust, chalk, and shredded rope into the wind. The arena became a storm of tiny movements. The serpent's senses overloaded. It struck everywhere at once, snapping at feathers, dust clouds, and floating nonsense. I used blind spot step between the densest clouds, each movement hidden inside 1,000 false signals. Then I climbed onto its spine. The serpent twisted. I tied wires around its glowing bones, looping them through its own ribs. Harper's clips bit down. The serpent tried to dive off the arena. I connected the wires to the stone ring and jumped away. It pulled. The wires tightened. The serpent tied itself into a knot. Grace drove her spear into the knot's center. Owen, because he cannot resist terrible timing, leaped from a broken pillar and smashed the spear deeper with both clubs. The wind serpent burst, and for 10 seconds the entire tower went quiet. Reward acquired, airless notch. My breathing no longer disturbed the air when hidden. Grace helped me stand afterward. She did not ask if I was okay. She knew I would lie. She only said, "You adapted." I said I panicked with accessories. Same thing, apparently. The climb continued. Floor 9 tried illusions. I ignored them because visual attention was already my least stable relationship. Floor 10 used gravity wells. I dropped duplicated coins until the wells revealed themselves by pulling the coins sideways. Floor 11 had singing statues that forced players to march into traps. Silent Buckle protected me, so I rearranged the statues until their songs canceled each other out. For 6 minutes, the entire floor sounded like a choir falling downstairs. Floor 12 was worse. Not because of monsters. Because of people. A powerful group from another safe zone reached the tower from the western path. They had strong equipment and bad habits. Their leader was not famous enough to deserve a name. He decided Ashford's teams were slowing the climb and tried to take control of the supplies. I listened from the top of a crate as he explained how power should decide who ate first. I almost missed Trevor. At least Trevor was honest about being awful. This guy wrapped cruelty in leadership words and expected everyone to nod. I did not argue. Arguing gives stupid ideas furniture. I staged a demonstration. That night I duplicated empty ration boxes and placed them around the Western group's camp, each one stuffed with rocks. Then I moved their real food into Ashford's storage under Grace's watch. In the morning, the Western group opened their crates and found stones. Their leader accused Ashford of theft. I took off my belt on a platform above them, just long enough for everyone to see me holding a loaf of bread. Then I put it back on and dropped the loaf into his own backpack. People saw the bread fall from nowhere into his bag. I repeated it with cheese. Then dried meat. Then an entire onion, because I believe in callbacks. The crowd turned on him before I said a word. He reached for his weapon. I whispered beside him, swing now, prove them right. He did. Blue tower chains, similar to the safe zone restraints, wrapped him because combat was forbidden on rest platforms. His own followers stepped away, suddenly very interested in fairness. No politics, no speeches, no fancy excuses, just a bully tricked into showing his teeth under lantern light. We took the supplies back and kept climbing. On floor 15, the tower gave me my most absurd skill. Boss was a treasure mimic the size of a house. It disguised itself as a reward chest, except the disguise would have worked better if the chest had not been breathing. Players still approached, because greed makes people nearsighted. Mimic swallowed 5 fighters before Grace pinned its lid shut. It thrashed, laughed, and spat gold coins that turned into biting beetles. I slipped behind it and found the latch where its false hinges met. Every mimic has a hinge. Every hinge is an opinion about opening. I used pocket loop to hide one hinge pin. The mimic tried to bite again. Its lid fell off. Inside was a swirling red mouth, 3 swallowed players, and a mountain of half-digested loot. I jumped in because apparently I had become the kind of person who jumps into monsters for convenience. Inside, visual attention behaved strangely. The mimic's stomach walls could not see me, but they could feel desire. Everything inside wanted to be found. Coins shivered, swords hummed, potions glowed. My belt drank the noise. Skill acquired, nobody's claim. For a short time, an unattended object I touched was treated as belonging to no one. I did not understand until I touched the mimic's treasure pile. Every coin stopped glowing. Every cursed item lost its owner. Every swallowed player's stolen gear came loose at once. The mimic gagged. I used double tuck on a bag of its own gold, copied it 8 times, and threw the copies down its throat. They dissolved into empty ownership, making the mimic choke on treasure that technically did not exist. Grace cut it from outside. Owen pulled players free. I crawled out covered in slime, holding the real reward. Harper later refused to let me enter the forge until I washed in the river. Twice. Nobody's claim changed everything. Before I stole things. Now I could make stolen things stop being stolen long enough to return them. Player killers hated that. Treasure beasts hated that. Locked dungeon mechanisms hated that. I once walked into a bandit-style hideout, touched every weapon rack, and made the weapons count as nobodies for 30 seconds. The moment the criminals grabbed them, the weapons did not recognize their hands and slid away like wet soap. Owen and the guards walked in to find 12 dangerous men trying to threaten people with empty fists. Another time, a cursed sword tried to possess whoever held it. I touched it with the belt active, made it nobody's claim, and left it stuck in a tree. It spent an hour whispering offers to squirrels. The squirrels were not impressed. But the tower was not finished with us. At floor 20, the sky needle changed shape, not in reaction to me. It had always been built that way, waiting for any group strong enough to reach the midpoint. The spiral path ended at a black gate, and beyond it was an arena floating inside a storm cloud. The gate allowed only 10 players. Grace chose the strongest fighters. I was not on the first list. Not because she doubted me, because the arena description said the boss hunted unseen movement, sending me and sounded like feeding a secret to a mouth designed for secrets. I laughed when she explained. Then I walked through the gate before anyone could stop me. The system counted me as unknown for 3 seconds, got confused, and accepted 9 plus something. The arena boss was the Thunder Butcher, a massive horned creature with cleavers made of lightning. It did not wear armor. It wore storm clouds around its shoulders like a bad mood. Every time it swung, thunder cracked and the platform split. It hunted unseen movement by striking where attention was missing. For the first time, my invisibility became a liability. When I wore the belt, the boss sensed the empty space and attacked it. When I removed the belt, it saw me and attacked harder. So I did something new. I made everyone invisible to it. Not with magic, with confusion. I ran around the arena placing feathers, smoke pellets, duplicated cloaks, broken shields, and loose straps everywhere. Laughing Seam made each object seem like it belonged. Blind Spot Step let me cross gaps. Silent Buckle hid my timing. Then I moved through the fighters and shifted their positions by inches, tugging sleeves, tapping shoulders, pushing weapon tips. The boss hunted absence. I created absence everywhere. Every time the Thunder Butcher raised a cleaver, I dropped a cloak from pocket loop. Its attention snapped to the empty shape. It struck cloth. Grace stabbed its knee. Another fighter hit its horn. Owen, who absolutely should not have been one of the 10, but had followed by clinging to a supply crate, smashed its toes. The boss roared, lightning building in its chest. I recognized that glow. Big final attack, straight line, very dramatic, very stupid if redirected. I took off my belt and stood in front of it. "Hey," I shouted. The boss looked at me. Everyone looked at me. My ribs still hurt from the wind serpent. My shoulders still ached from Trevor's chain. My plain belt hung at my waist, scratched, patched, ugly, and perfect. I put the belt back on and used blind spot step under the boss's arm. The lightning blast fired at where my visible body had been. I had placed the mimic's lid there, propped between two iron spikes. Lightning hit the lid, bounced into the storm chains above the arena, traveled around the platform, and came down through the Thunder Butcher's own horns. For 1 white second, the boss became a lightning rod with anger issues. Then it exploded. The midpoint gate opened. The reward appeared in front of me, not behind me this time. A black leather segment with no shine and no weight. Skill acquired, unseen authority. System tracking reduced while hidden. Not removed, reduced. But the ranking board did not know what to do with me anymore. My name flickered between Jonah, unknown, and blank. Quest rewards found me late. Enemy targeting delayed. Traps hesitated before deciding I counted as a person. That hesitation made me a monster. Not the loud kind. The kind that wins before the enemy understands the game started. After floor 20, other safe zones started sending messages. Not politics, not rulers making demands, just players begging for help. Roads were blocked by killer groups, dungeons were poisoning wells. A city anchor could protect Ashford, but only if we reached the top before the calamity woke. We did not have time to save everyone. So I saved the ones who were on the way in the most unreasonable ways possible. At the broken bridge, a gang had trapped travelers on one side and monsters on the other. I used nobody's claim on the bridge supports, making the gang's ownership marks fade, then moved their own barricades into the monster path. When they tried to reclaim the bridge, the monsters saw them as fresh obstacles and chased them into a guard patrol. The travelers crossed while I walked under the bridge tying ropes into a giant slingshot. Why a slingshot? Because one gang member tried to escape on a stolen wagon. Owen launched him into a haystack, so hard the haystack needed a moment. At the Black Pond, a water beast demanded sacrifices by dragging players under when they approached. I could not fight underwater well. The belt did not hide bubbles. So I duplicated empty potion bottles, tied them into a giant raft, and walked across the pond on floating trash while invisible. The beast watched the bottles, sensed nobody, and surfaced in confusion. Grace hit it with a lightning spear technique stolen from the Thunder Butcher's horn reward. The pond boiled, the beast rolled over, and the trapped players floated up inside air bubbles. At the old theater dungeon, monsters forced players to act out scenes until they collapsed. I stepped onto the stage unseen and started moving props. A tragic throne rolled away. A fake moon fell early. A villain cape wrapped around the monster director's head. The dungeon tried to continue the performance, but I ruined every dramatic moment with perfect timing until the audience monsters booed their own boss to death. Harper called that one art. Grace called it disturbing. Owen asked if we could do it again. We could not, because the 25th floor opened with Trevor's revenge. He should have been locked away. He had been locked away. But the black rain shard inside him had not stopped growing. Harper's cell held his body, not the monster crystal blooming in his blood. One night it burst out, wrapped him in black veins, and tore open the floor beneath the jail. He escaped into an underground tunnel that led toward the Sky Needle's lower roots. By the time we learned, he was already ahead of us. Not alone. The shard had twisted prisoners who followed him, turning them into half-monsters with weapons fused to their arms. They were still people enough to hate and monster enough to ignore pain. Trevor had lost his smile. That worried me more than when he had it. He ambushed us on floor 25, the Hall of Falling Stars. The hall was a long glass bridge under a sky full of burning meteors. Every few seconds, a star fell through the ceiling and smashed into the floor, leaving craters of blue fire. Trevor waited at the far end with his chain blade, now grown into black crystal links. His voice carried through the hall. "Come out, Jonah." Everyone looked at me. I kept the belt on. He raised one hand. His twisted followers dragged captured players to the edge of the bridge. That was the knife he had left somewhere. Not a scheme, not a trick of wording, just cruelty with hostages. Grace's spear trembled in her grip. Owen cursed under his breath. Harper was not with us. She was back in Ashford reinforcing the anchor platform. We had no clean path. Trevor knew my habits. If I moved to free the prisoners, he would swing wide. If I appeared, he would strike. If Grace attacked, the hostages fell. So I did something Trevor had never seen me do. I made myself obvious. I removed the belt and walked forward with both hands raised. The hall went silent except for falling stars. Trevor watched every step, finally tired of hiding. "No," I said, "I wanted you to look at me." He laughed once. "Good." His eyes stayed on my face. That meant he was not looking at the floor. Before stepping forward, I had used double tuck on every broken glass shard near the bridge entrance. While walking, I let them slip from pocket loop behind me. Laughing seam made them settle like debris. Blind spot step was impossible while visible, but my hands were not the trick. My shadow was. Unseen authority had changed something I barely understood. When attention locked too hard on me, the belt could hide the edges of what I carried, even visible. I had tied thin wires to my belt and dragged them through the glass shards across the floor. They spread like a spiderweb behind me. Trevor saw the man. He missed the trap. A meteor fell. Blue fire flashed. The glass heated. I snapped the belt on. The world forgot to watch me. Then I pulled. The wires yanked the glass shards into the air. For 1 second, the whole bridge glittered like a broken galaxy. Trevor's followers flinched, covering their eyes. Grace moved. Owen moved. The prisoners dropped low, because I had whispered to them earlier through the floor cracks. Trevor swung his chain blade at the empty space where I had vanished. I had already used blind spot step to reach the hostage line. I cut the ropes. Grace's spear flew over my shoulder and pinned 3 twisted followers to the wall by their weapon arms. Owen slammed into 2 more and carried them backward like furniture. The rescued players crawled away. Trevor charged. He did not care about anyone else now. Just me. The chain blade screamed through the air. It had learned from him. It swept low, high, wide, unpredictable, filling the bridge with death. I could not dodge forever. Each swing forced me closer to the edge. So I stopped dodging. I let the chain wrap around my waist. The black links tightened over the belt. Pain hit my spine. Trevor grinned and pulled with everything he had. He expected to drag me into the open. Instead, nobody's claim activated. For one breath, the chain belonged to no one. Not Trevor. Not me. Just loose metal wrapped around a plain belt with an opinion. I slid out of it like a coin through fingers. Trevor pulled nothing, overbalanced, and stepped into the path of the next falling star. I almost let it hit him. I wanted to. But if it killed him there, he would become a legend to the cowards who admired him, a monster slain by fate, a villain swallowed by the tower. I wanted him small. I wanted him seen. I pushed him, not away from the meteor, toward the safe restraint circle at the end of the bridge, the one meant to prevent fights after a floor clear. Grace had noticed it earlier, I had remembered. Trevor stumbled into it while swinging at the air. His chain blade crossed the circle line. Blue chains erupted through black crystal and pinned him flat to the glass. The falling star hit beside him, close enough to burn away half his chain, not close enough to kill. He screamed. Everyone heard. Everyone saw. I took off the belt and stood over him. "You kept saying I was weak because I hide," I said, "but you only attack people when you think they cannot fight back. So tell me, Trevor, which one of us was hiding?" He had no answer. The tower gave us the floor clear. Trevor was dragged back to Ashford under guard, sealed in a crystal cell Harper built above ground this time, where everyone could see him and nobody had to pretend fear made him powerful. That should have ended my problem with him. Maybe it did. But the black shard fragments we collected from his chain pulsed when pointed toward the top of the Sky Needle. Something up there had fed the storm that fed him. Not a hidden controller, not someone behind a curtain changing rules because of me, just a calamity sleeping where the tower pointed. A monster waiting for the city anchor to remain unclaimed. We had 5 days left. 5 days sounds generous until you're standing in a town full of wounded players, broken roads, half-repaired walls, nervous merchants, and a tower that keeps glowing like it is laughing at your calendar. The moment the countdown appeared, Ashford split into 2 types of people. The first type sharpened weapons and practiced heroic poses. The second type counted bandages and looked at the gate like it was already a mouth. I belonged to a third type. I walked around invisible, listening for trouble, because trouble always talks too loudly when it thinks nobody useful is nearby. By noon, I had found 3 separate disasters, trying to be born at the same time. A group of greedy players had started blocking the western supply road. They were not calling themselves anything impressive, which I respected, because they did not deserve branding. They had glowing equipment, bad attitudes, and a fake rule that everyone entering Ashford owed them a gate fee. The fee changed depending on how scared the traveler looked. If someone had food, the fee was food. If someone had potions, the fee was potions. If someone had nothing, the fee became entertainment. That last part made my hands go cold. They had a prisoner kneeling beside a wagon, making him repeat that weak players needed strong players to survive. Every time he stumbled over the words, one of them raised a lightning whip and let the sparks kiss the ground near his face. I could have waited for grace. I could have run for guards. I could have made a plan involving ropes, timing, angles, and at least 3 buckets. Instead, I took one step behind the lightning whip player, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "Your weapon thinks you are embarrassing." He froze. The whip crackled. I used nobody's claim on the handle. For half a second, the whip belonged to nobody. It slipped from his fingers like a live eel, snapped backward, wrapped around his ankle. And yanked him upside down from a tree branch, because earlier I had tied the tail of the whip to that branch, while he was busy feeling powerful. He screamed, the others spun around. I was already gone. Silent buckles swallowed my laugh. Weightless strap carried me across the dirt without marks. Pocket loop opened, and I pulled out 6 copied bronze bells from the town stables. I tossed one into a wagon, one behind a barrel, one under a horse, and 3 into their own supply sacks. Laughing sea made each bell settle naturally, like the universe had always wanted that exact spot to jingle. Then I ran between the bad players and slapped the backs of their knees. They staggered, bells rang everywhere. Their eyes could not find me, but their fear did. One swung his sword at a wagon, another fired ice into the road. A third tripped over the kneeling prisoner and fell face first into a basket of turnips. The turnips were innocent, but the expression on his face said betrayal. Inside the road's protection boundary, attacks against travelers triggered warning chains, not full jail chains yet, just blue warning links that snapped around wrists and tightened with every hostile action. So I made them hostile. I untied the prisoner, shoved a bread roll into his hand, and whispered, "Crawl toward the trees when the idiot with the red gloves starts yelling." Then I took off my belt for one breath. All 6 of them saw me standing on the wagon roof, waving with both hands. "Miss me?" I asked. The red-gloved idiot threw a fire spear. I clicked the belt back on and stepped aside. Fire spear slammed into the road arch, which counted as protected property. Blue chains exploded from the stones. The first player got wrapped so fast he looked like a badly prepared gift. The second tried to cut the chains, which counted as resisting. The third tried to run, but I had already tied his bootlaces to the wagon brake. He made it one heroic step before meeting the dirt like an old friend. The guards arrived to find the western supply road full of glowing weapons, tied criminals, freed travelers, and one confused horse wearing a bronze bell around its neck. The guard asked what happened. The rescued prisoner pointed at empty air and said, "The belt guy happened." That was the first time I heard someone say it without laughing. It should have made me proud. It mostly made me nervous, because reputation is just another kind of attention, and attention was the one thing my entire fighting style was built to avoid. The second disaster was worse. Harper dragged me into her forge by the collar, even though she could not see my face while the belt was on. She had learned to grab the empty space that annoyed her the most and was correct 90% of the time. Her forge looked like an explosion had been organized by a neat person, nails sorted by size, chains sorted by weight, broken swords in one barrel. Broken dreams in another barrel, which was just where Owen kept putting his clubs after snapping them. Harper pointed at the workbench. On it were 3 black crystals, each one pulsing with the same ugly rhythm as the shard that had grown inside Trevor. "They were found near the outer farms," she said. I leaned closer. The crystals hummed against my teeth. "Monster eggs?" I asked. "Worse, bacons." I waited. Harper hated explaining things twice, so she explained them once like she was throwing knives. The crystals were attracting wandering monsters toward weak spots in the wall, not because of me. Not because Ashford had leveled up. They were part of the old tower sickness, scattered before the apocalypse game had even dropped us into this place. If enough of them woke, the final climb would not matter, because the city would spend the last day getting chewed from every side. Grace joined us halfway through the explanation with dust on her armor and blood on one sleeve. Owen followed her holding a sack full of monster ears, then saw Harper's expression and hid the sack behind his back like that made it normal. "We need to destroy them," Grace asked. Harper shook her head. "If smashed, they scream." Owen raised one finger. Important question. How loud is Crystal screaming? Loud enough to invite everything with teeth. That ruled out Owen's plan, which had definitely been hitting them until they regretted existing. I touched one crystal with 2 fingers. My belt warmed. Nobody's claim flickered, then failed. The crystal was not owned. It was anchored. It did not care who held it. But it did care where it sat. That gave me a terrible idea, which meant it was probably mine. By sunset, we found the first beacon buried under a farm well. 3 horned wolves circled the field, growling at shadows. A family hid in their cellar with 1 rusty pitchfork and the absolute wrong amount of optimism. Grace wanted to fight the wolves directly. Owen wanted to fight the wolves directly while yelling louder. Harper wanted to collapse the well, but that risked the crystal screaming. I asked for a rope, 2 buckets, 1 ham, and all of Owen's monster ears. Everyone looked at me. Owen clutched the sack. They have sentimental value. I said to who? He thought about that and handed it over. I tied the ears to the rope, tied the ham to the middle, lowered the entire disgusting necklace into the well, and activated laughing seam so the smell drifted in natural waves. The horned wolves stopped circling. Their noses lifted, their eyes narrowed at the well. Predators love easy food almost as much as cruel people love easy victims. The first wolf jumped into the well. The second followed. The third hesitated because it had the rare gift of almost being smart. I stepped behind it, invisible and silent, and gently kicked its tail. It jumped too. The rope went tight. The wolves snapped at the ham, then at the ears, then at each other. Their claws scraped the stone walls. The beacon pulsed faster beneath them, excited by violence. That was when Harper dropped her modified iron lid over the well and locked it with a chain. The crystal screamed. But the sound stayed inside the well with 3 angry wolves, 1 ham, several ears, and the worst dinner party in history. Grace drove her spear through the lid's center. Lightning ran down the metal, not enough to shatter the beacon, just enough to overload its pulse. I used nobody's claim on the chain links one by one, making them forget which direction tension wanted them to pull. The lid squeezed downward. The stone groaned. The beacon cracked without breaking open. A reward window flashed above the well. Beacon suppressed. Temporary city stability increased. Owen looked at the sealed well and whispered, "So we made a wolf soup battery." Harper said, "Never describe anything again." The second beacon was hidden in a schoolhouse outside the east wall. That one was surrounded by tiny paper birds that flew like knives. They sliced anything that moved quickly, so the obvious fighters could not approach. Birds did not have eyes, which annoyed me, because being invisible to vision does nothing against murderous stationary with commitment issues. I had to become boring to motion itself. I moved 1 inch at a time. No heroic sprint, no shadow step, no dramatic dash, just slow, stupid, patient movement while paper birds circled overhead. I had silent buckle hiding my breath, weightless strap hiding my contact with the floor, and forgotten waist making every half memory of me slide away from the people watching outside. But the birds sensed air pressure. So Owen helped. Not by being quiet, obviously, that would have been unnatural. He ran around the schoolhouse banging 2 pans together, screaming, "I am a storm, fear my kitchen." Every paper bird turned toward him. Grace stood beside the window, ready to pull him out if the birds swarmed too hard. Harper loaded a crossbow with blunt bolts wrapped in cloth. I crawled under the desks, reached the beacon glowing beneath the teacher's platform, and saw the real problem. The beacon had grown paper roots into every book in the room. If I pulled it out, the books would shred, and thousands of paper knives would explode outward. I hate problems that punish obvious solutions. They make me feel seen, which is rude. I opened Pocket Loop and started removing objects from my hidden storage. Chalk sticks, erasers, loose nails, 3 spoons, a broken gear. The tiny wooden duck Owen insisted was lucky, and Harper insisted was mine now because it smelled like smoke. Double Tuck copied the chalk first. 1 piece became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became enough to draw lines across the floor, walls, desks, and ceiling. Laughing Seam made the lines look like old classroom markings instead of a desperate, invisible man scribbling around murder birds. Then I touched the first book and used nobody's claim. The book forgot the beacon. Not forever, just a breath. I slid a chalk line between the root and the page, did it again and again and again. Outside, Owen's pan performance became less confident. "I may have attracted more birds than planned," he shouted. Grace answered with spear thunder. I kept working. 1 root, 1 chalk barrier, 1 claimed book, 1 quiet breath. By the time I reached the last shelf, the room was glowing with chalk lines like a terrible diagram drawn by a genius raccoon. The beacon pulsed, confused. Its roots could not find the books. Its scream tried to rise, but the sound ran into silent buckle, spreading through the chalk dust on my hands. I pulled the beacon free. Every paper bird outside froze midair. Then, because I had no better container, I stuffed the beacon into Owen's lucky wooden duck and threw it out the window. Grace caught it with the flat of her spear and slammed it into Harper's suppression box. The paper birds collapsed into harmless worksheets. Owen picked one up, read it, and said, "This is math. The true monster survived." The third beacon was under Ashford itself. Of course it was. Nothing important can ever be in a convenient location like a basket labeled "Here is the dangerous object." It had to be beneath the fountain, connected to the same glowing water everyone had been drinking since day one. The good news was that the water was not poisonous. The bad news was that the beacon had learned people. It did not make monsters, it made rumors. On morning of the fourth day, Ashford sounded like a jar full of angry bees. People whispered that Grace was planning to abandon weaker players, that Harper had built secret weapons for herself, that Owen had been bitten and was hiding a monster infection, that I had never existed at all, and the empty player was just a story used to scare criminals. That last one almost helped me, but the rest were dangerous. Rumors are invisible weapons. I respected them more than swords. Beacon under the fountain pushed fear into people's mouths, then let the crowd sharpen it. Players who had fought together yesterday stared at each other like enemies. Merchants hid supplies. Guards questioned neighbors. Two groups almost started a fight in the square before blue chains snapped up as a warning. I stood in the middle of it with the belt on, and for the first time, invisibility felt useless. You cannot stab a rumor, you cannot trip it with rope, you cannot shove it into a haystack, although I remain open to research. Grace climbed onto the fountain wall and tried to calm everyone, but every sentence she said twisted as it passed through the crowd. Harper brought proof that the water was pulsing with beacon energy, but people were too scared to understand. Owen tried to make everyone laugh, half the square laughed. The other half accused him of hiding something behind jokes. I felt forgotten waist twitch around my middle. Skill erased my name from short-term memory. It made me slippery in thought. I had used it to make criminals forget orders, guards forget seeing me, monsters forget what they were chasing. But maybe I had been thinking too small. I walked through the crowd and started whispering. Not insults this time. Questions. Who told you Grace was leaving? The player blinked. I heard it from someone. Who? I don't remember. I moved to the merchant hiding potions under his table, who said Harper built weapons for herself. He frowned. A woman near the gate. What did she look like? His eyes slipped away from me, then from the memory. I don't know. I moved faster, whispering beside ears, planting not commands, not lies, just tiny hooks of doubt. Who told you? When did you hear it? Did you see it yourself? Why would Owen hide an infection by juggling turnips in public? That one broke the mood for 3 people immediately. The beacon hated doubts. Its power depended on fear moving without friction. I gave every rumor friction. Forgotten waste turned the source of each lie slippery. Silent buckle carried my whispers under the louder voices. Laughing seam made the questions sound like thoughts people had formed themselves. The crowd started pausing, then muttering, then comparing stories. Every rumor had no root. Every accusation came from a faceless someone. Every fear felt borrowed. The fountain water turned black. The beacon screamed under the stones, but it was a soft scream, tired and embarrassed. Harper moved first. She jammed 4 iron rods into the fountain corners. Grace struck the water with lightning. Owen, because he had been waiting for permission to do something stupid, threw his entire sack of monster ears into the fountain. The black water exploded upward in a column shaped like a screaming face. I jumped into the fountain. Yes, with the belt on. Yes, it was cold. Yes, I regretted everything immediately. At the bottom, beneath the glowing water, the beacon sat inside a nest of black threads. Each thread led toward a different person in the square, feeding on their attention. I grabbed the beacon and activated unseen authority. The world blurred. For 1 second, even the attention threads lost track of what they were connected to. I used nobody's claim on the fountain stones around the beacon, not the beacon itself. The stones forgot they were holding it. The beacon popped free like a rotten tooth. I rose from the water, holding it over my head. Nobody saw me. They saw black water dripping from empty air. They saw a pulsing crystal floating above the fountain. They saw Grace aim her spear. They saw Harper open the suppression box. They saw Owen slip on monster water and accidentally tackle a player who had been about to panic. I threw the beacon. Grace struck it midair. Harper's box swallowed the pieces before they could scream. The square went quiet. Then a player near the front looked at Grace and said, "Wait, Why would you abandon us after saving us 11 times? Another looked at Harper. Why would she make secret weapons when she barely lets anyone touch the normal ones? Owen stood dripping beside the fountain and said, I do have a secret. Everyone looked at him. He held up one monster ear. I saved the best ear. The crowd groaned so hard it became unity. That was how we stopped the beacon under Ashford, not with a legendary sword, not with holy armor, with questions, wet socks, and Owen being too strange to frame correctly. When the third suppression message appeared, the city's countdown steadied, the walls brightened, the outer gates stopped groaning, people breathed again. I thought we had earned one quiet hour. I was becoming adorable in my optimism. That night, while Harper reinforced the suppression boxes and Grace organized the final tower teams, someone stole my face. Not literally. If someone had stolen my face, I would have made better jokes while panicking. A player wrapped a brown strap around his waist, covered his face with a scarf, and walked through the market claiming to be the empty player. His timing was almost impressive. People were scared, tired, and ready to believe anything that came with confidence. He told merchants to hand over supplies for secret operations. He told weaker players to give him potions so he could protect them later. He told a group of children that if they did not bring him coins, invisible monsters would follow them at night. That was the moment I stopped finding it funny. I watched him from a rooftop while he strutted through an alley with 3 helpers. No names, no style, no respect for the craft. His fake belt was too shiny, his scarf was too dramatic, and he kept saying mysterious things like, I was never here, while standing directly in lantern light. The disrespect hurt almost as much as the crime. Owen found me on the roof because he had started guessing where I would lurk whenever someone needed scaring. Are we angry? He asked. We are artistically offended. He nodded like that made sense. Do you need clubs? I need applause. That is worse for them. I followed the fake through 3 streets. He collected a sack of supplies and led his helpers toward an abandoned bathhouse near the inner wall. They laughed about how easy everyone was to scare. The fake said the best part about pretending to be invisible was that nobody expected proof. I stood behind him and removed my belt. His helpers saw me first. Their faces changed from smug to pale, so fast I almost clapped. The fake turned around slowly. I smiled. You know what I love about your performance? He swallowed. Nothing. Then I put the belt back on. Panic is a beautiful instrument when played carefully. I did not attack them. That would have been simple. I opened pocket loop and dropped copied brown straps all around the bathhouse. One on the floor, one across a bench, one hanging from a pipe. One wrapped around a bucket. Laughing seam made each strap look meaningful. Silent buckle hid my movement as I circled them. The fake grabbed the nearest strap and shouted, There, see, this is mine. I whispered from his left, Wrong one. He threw it away. I whispered from his right, Warmer. He spun, saw nothing, grabbed another strap, then another. His helpers backed into each other. I used forgotten waste on the idea of which belt he had brought in. It sounds impossible, but the skill had grown strange after unseen authority. I could not erase objects from existence, but I could blur the connection between a panicked mind and a recent detail. The fake looked at 6 belts and forgot which one was his. Then Owen entered through the front door, wearing a towel around his shoulders like a cape. Bathhouse inspection, he announced. The helpers screamed. Grace stepped through the back entrance with guards behind her. Harper had not come, but she had sent a net launcher, which Grace held like she had been waiting her whole life for an excuse. The fake tried to run. I stuck my foot out. He tripped, crashed into a bucket, rolled down the wet tiles, and slid directly under the net when Grace fired. The guards pulled him up. He started shouting that he had been cursed by the real empty player. I took off my belt beside him. The whole bathhouse saw me appear with a copied strap in one hand. I said, Do not use my name to scare children. He stopped shouting. The safe zone chains wrapped him and his helpers for theft, threats, and attempted fraud. No contracts, no trials, no paperwork. Just the town stones deciding that stealing emergency supplies from scared people made you eligible for a glowing blue timeout. Owen leaned toward the fake and said, Also, your belt work was weak. I should not have felt proud of that. I did. After that, something shifted in Ashford. The rumors about me changed shape. At first, I had been a joke, then a ghost, then a curse. Now people began treating the empty space, near suspicious behavior like it might be occupied by consequences. A pickpocket returned 3 wallets to a bench and apologized to the wind. A loud player stopped threatening a merchant mid-sentence, looked around and said, Actually, fair price. Two gamblers tried to cheat newcomers with loaded dice until one die rolled upward into my invisible hand and landed on the cheater's tongue. He confessed while coughing. Fear can be ugly, but when bad people fear being watched while good people can finally breathe, I am not noble enough to dislike it. The next morning, the tower entrance changed from blue to silver. Not because of me. The beacon's suppression had stabilized the lower levels, and the old route opened the way it had probably always been waiting to open. A side door appeared beside the main gate, narrow and half buried in roots. Above it, a window flickered. Optional challenge path available. Reward ascent advantage. Recommended participants 1 to 4. Owen read it and grinned. Grace read it and frowned. Harper read it from the city wall using a scope, then sent a note tied to a bolt that landed 6 inches from my foot. The note said, "Do not die in the stupid door." That was basically encouragement. We entered with Grace in front, Owen behind her, and me everywhere else. The passage smelled like dust, iron, and old rain. It slanted downward instead of up, which made no sense until we reached a round chamber beneath the tower foundation. There was no monster waiting. There were 12 doors. Each door had a painted symbol: a sword, a shield, a ring, a cloak, a spear, a bow, a staff, a helmet, a pair of boots, a chain. A crown-shaped chess piece, which I refused to respect because we were not doing that kind of arc, and a plain brown rectangle that looked almost like a belt if the artist had given up halfway. Owen pointed at it. "That one is yours." "Could be a plank." Grace tilted her head. "It is definitely a belt." Betrayal from both sides. The chamber floor lit up. A calm message appeared. "Choose the door that represents your strength." I hated it immediately. Grace looked at the spear door. Owen looked at the 2 clubs he carried, then at the sword, then at the shield, then at the helmet, then at the chain, like he was willing to be flexible if violence was included. I looked at the belt door and felt the setup. Too obvious. The tower loved punishing obvious answers. "Do not touch anything," I said. Owen froze with one finger, already half an inch from the helmet door. I walked around the room with the belt on and silent buckle active. Dust lay thick near every door except one. The belt door was clean, almost polished. Too many people had chosen it, or the room wanted me to think so. The sword door had scratches from attacks. The shield door had dents. The ring door had burn marks. Every door showed history. The painted brown rectangle had none. I crouched and looked at the floor instead. There, hidden beneath dust near the center of the chamber, was a 13th symbol, not painted on a door, scratched into the stone by someone's fingernail long ago. An empty circle. No equipment, no weapon, no shape. I smiled. The tower did not ask what item made me strong. It asked what represented my strength. My strength was not the belt was the tool. My strength was the space people ignored until it was too late. I pressed my palm onto the empty circle. Every door unlocked at once. Owen whispered, "That feels like cheating." Grace said, "It feels like him." Doors opened into 12 short hallways, and each hallway contained one trial. We did not have time for all of them. So naturally, I decided to steal from all of them. Pocket Loop could not store large objects, but Double Tuck could copy small, useful pieces. I ran through the sword hallway first, dodging blades that swung from walls. I did not fight the blades. I touched their hinge pins, made them nobody's claim, and let them fall out. Double Tuck copied the pins. Then I pocket looped the copies and left the hallway less deadly for Grace. In the shield hallway, stone plates slammed together. I crawled between them, used weightless strap to avoid pressure triggers, and collected rubbery padding from the plate edges. In the ring hallway, fire circles chased heat signatures, so I filled my pockets with warm rocks and tossed them behind me like breadcrumbs for a very angry campfire. In the cloak hallway, darkness tried to wrap around my shoulders, but it could not decide where my shoulders were, so I walked out wearing 3 strips of shadow like ugly scarves. Owen tried the helmet hallway and came out with a dented bucket that increased headbutt damage. He was delighted. Grace completed the spear hallway properly because someone in our group needed dignity. She fought 3 floating lances, broke their formation, and returned with a silver tassel that made her spear techniques faster when defending others. I meanwhile crawled through the boot hallway and stole all the laces. That mattered more than it sounds. At the center chamber, the 12 hallway rewards merged into one ascent advantage. Because I had touched pieces from every path, the reward could not decide what category I belonged to. The window flickered. Contribution pattern unclear. Reward adapting. I raised one hand. Please do not become pants. Skill strengthened. Pocket loop. Capacity increased. Temporary duplicate duration increased. Stored object count increased when objects are considered overlooked. I stared at the message. Owen looked at the mountain of stolen hinge pins, laces, pads, warm rocks, shadow strips, and one dented bucket spread around my feet. "You are now officially a trash dragon," he said. That was the most accurate compliment anyone had ever given me. The ascended vantage opened a lift at the back of the chamber, not a normal lift, a stone platform hanging from chains so large each link was bigger than my head. It rose through the center of the tower foundation, bypassing several broken stair routes and stopping at a hidden rest level between floors. The rest level should have been safe. It had benches, water, supply crates, a calm blue floor line. Everything about it said, "Please relax." Which is why I trusted it less than a smiling snake. He had barely stepped off the lift when a group from another safe zone stumbled in from the opposite side. They were exhausted, bleeding, and dragging 2 prisoners. At first, I thought they were rescuing them. Then one of the prisoners fell, and the leading player kicked him. My mood dropped through the floor. Grace's hand tightened on her spear. Owen stopped smiling. The safe line should have prevented combat, but the cruel players were clever in a small, ugly way. They did not hit hard enough to trigger the chains. They shoved, tripped, starved, humiliated. The system recognized direct attacks. It did not always understand slow cruelty. But I understood it perfectly. I kept my belt on and walked close. The leading player bragged that he had a detection ring that could find hidden enemies. He lifted his hand and a red gem blinked. It did not point at me. It pointed at one of the prisoners, because the prisoner had been forced to carry monster bait. That explained the blood. They were using captives to draw monsters through dangerous floors. I wanted to break his ring. Instead, I did something better. I used nobody's claim on the bait pouch. The monster scent forgot the prisoner. Then I used pocket loop to swap it with a copied pouch tied under the leading player's cloak. The detection ring spun. The gem pointed at him. He frowned and slapped the ring. I whispered, "It knows." He went pale. Owen, somehow understanding the assignment, walked into the rest area with his dented bucket helmet and said, "That ring looks cursed." The other players backed away from their leader. Gem blinked faster because I had filled his cloak with every warm rock from the ring hallway, each one rubbed with a tiny bit of monster bait. The ring did not just point at him. It screamed red light at his stomach. He panicked and ripped off his cloak. I tugged the cloak with laughing seams so it flew toward his own followers. They jumped aside. One drew a sword, another raised a bow. The leader shouted that someone was framing him, which was technically correct and emotionally satisfying. The prisoners stared, confused. I whispered to them, "Step across the blue line and sit down." They did. The leading player lunged to grab them. Grace moved faster. She did not strike him. She planted her spear between his hand and the prisoner, perfectly still. He grabbed the spear shaft and tried to yank it away. The safe line counted that as hostile contact against another player's equipment. Blue chains snapped out of the floor. He yelled, twisted, and reached for the prisoner again. More chains wrapped him. His followers hesitated, because cruel people are brave only until consequences become visible. I took off my belt behind them. Every eye turned to me. I held up the real monster bait pouch. "You drop this," I said. The rest of them stepped away from their leader, so fast one tripped over a bench. He freed the prisoners, took the stolen supplies, and left the cruel group chained on the rest platform for the tower guards to collect after the floor reset. No speeches, no mercy performance. Just consequences tied tight enough to glow. One of the freed players asked how he could thank me. I almost gave a sarcastic answer. Then I looked at the bruises on his wrists and said, "When someone weaker than you needs help, do not ask if it is convenient." That sounded too heroic, so I immediately added, "Also, never trust a calm rest area. They are smug." He laughed. That was enough. By the third day before the deadline, the optional path had given us supplies, stronger tools, and a lift route. Ashford should have been focused. Instead, everyone became obsessed with making decoys. I blame Owen. He had watched me fool enemies with cloaks, belts, rocks, pouches, and trash for so long that he started teaching new players what he called the empty method. His first lesson involved standing still, throwing a turnip, and pretending the turnip was in charge. It worked once. That was the dangerous part. Soon half of Ashford was carrying decoy belts, fake pouches, spare cloaks, and bags of flour. A woman with a magic ring learned to heat stones and throw them to distract heat-seeking bats. A shield user tied bells to his shield, then threw the shield behind monsters so they turned their backs. A spear player stuck feather bundles onto arrows to make flying beasts chase them. The town looked ridiculous. It also started surviving. Monsters outside the walls stopped meeting proud individuals and started meeting traps built by terrified people who had decided being clever was less embarrassing than being dead. I watched from a rooftop as a group of new players handled a charging tusk beast without a single legendary attack. They dropped a cloak over a barrel, rattled bells behind it, rolled 3 hot stones under the cloak, and let the beast ram the wrong target. The barrel exploded in flour. The beast sneezed so hard it fell sideways. Then the group tied its legs and cheered like they had slain a dragon. I felt something strange twist in my chest. For once, my greatest skill was not hiding myself. It was making everyone else harder to hurt. Naturally, the world punished my emotional growth with a giant underground centipede. The creature burst from the quarry road at dusk, long as a train, armored in black plates, with silver hooks along its legs. It was drawn by the remaining trace of beacon energy leaking through the soil. The quarry had the stone Harper needed for final tower anchors. If we lost it, the wall repairs would slow. If we fought it directly, its armor would shred us. The legendary weapon players tried anyway. A flaming sword bounced off its head. A holy shield got hooked and dragged 20 feet. A magic ring made vines that the centipede ate like noodles. Grace's spear pierced between plates but could not reach deep enough. Owen hit one leg and got launched into a gravel pile. I climbed onto the centipede's back invisible. That sounds cool until you realize centipedes have too many legs, too much movement, and absolutely no respect for personal balance. I ran along its armor plates like a man sprinting across wet rooftops during an earthquake. Silent buckle hid my curses, which was good because there were many. The centipede sensed weight. Weightless strap reduced my steps, but not the objects I carried. So I stopped carrying them. Pocket loop opened and I poured out everything I had collected from the optional path. Rubber padding, laces, hinge pins, warm rocks, shadow strips, chalk, bells, flower packets. A wooden duck that still looked judgmental. Every item bounced along the centipede's back. The creature felt dozens of tiny impacts and thought prey was crawling all over it. It curled. That was what I wanted. I had noticed the quarry cranes earlier, big wooden arms used to lift stone blocks, each tied with thick chains. While everyone fought, I had used nobody's claim on the crane locks. They no longer belonged to the quarry workers, not for long, but long enough for me to move them without the safety latches resisting. As the centipede curled, laughing seam guided the loose laces and chains across its hooks. 1 loop, 2 loops, 10 loops, 20. Owen saw the pattern. He climbed out of the gravel pile, spat dust and shouted, "Pull the ugly shoelace." Half the fighters obeyed because they had finally learned that Owen yelling nonsense sometimes meant survival. They pulled the crane chains. The centipede's own leg hooks caught the loops. The cranes swung. The monster folded tighter, not because we overpowered it, but because every movement made it tie itself into a bigger knot. Grace drove her spear into the central joint. Harper, who had arrived with a wagon full of unfinished metal braces, stared at the knot for half a second, then loaded the braces into a launcher and fired them like giant staples. The centipede tried to uncurl. The staples held. I crawled to its head, touched the largest armor plate, and used nobody's claim. The plate forgot the centipede. Just for a heartbeat. But one heartbeat was enough for Grace's lightning to slide underneath. The blast ran through the body from head to tail. The centipede stiffened, smoked, and collapsed into a mountain of twitching legs and regret. A reward window appeared above the quarry. Emergency threat cleared. Group contribution acknowledged. Additional material acquired, black hook chitin. Harper walked over, picked up a piece of the monster's armor, and her eyes did the thing they did when she saw a way to build something dangerous. "No," I said. She looked at me. I pointed at Owen. "Do not make him centipede clubs." Owen gasped, "You cannot stop progress." Harper said nothing, which meant progress was already happening. That night, she used the chitin to reinforce my belt instead. New black strips were ugly, flexible, and almost impossible to cut. They threaded through the brown leather like dark veins. When she tightened the last rivet, the belt hummed. Comfortable fit. Reinforcement accepted. Durability increased. Pocket loop stability increased while under impact. I looked at Harper. "Did you just upgrade my belt with bug armor?" "Yes. I hate that it works." "You hate many useful things." From Harper, that was philosophical affection. The next problem arrived before breakfast. A message appeared over the square. Regional event, supply bloom. Temporary resource field opening beyond southern woods. Duration 6 hours. Every hungry, exhausted, desperate player in Ashford stared at those words like the sky had announced free miracles. Food plants, potion herbs, metal flowers, repair crystals. The supply bloom could prepare us for the final climb. It was also bait. Not from the system, from people. When something valuable appears, good people gather. Bad people follow the good people, then monsters follow everyone. Grace organized a harvest team with guards and fighters. Harper sent crates. Owen volunteered to protect the snack plants specifically. I went ahead alone. Southern woods opened into a glowing field where blue wheat waved beside red mushrooms and silver flowers. It looked peaceful in the exact way that gets people killed. I found the ambush in under a minute. A group of player killers hid in the tree line with nets, sleeping darts, and rope traps. They had no armor worth describing and no leader worth naming. Their plan was simple. Wait for Ashford's harvest team to spread out, cut off the weaker players, steal the supplies, and disappear into the woods. Simple plans are not always bad. They are just very funny when an invisible man hears the whole thing. I started with the nets. Pocket Loop swallowed the first folded net. Double Tuck copied it. I placed the copy 3 trees away, tied to the same trigger line but facing backward. Then I moved the second net, then the third. By the time the killers finished whispering their plan, every trap in the tree line was aimed at the person who set it. But that was not flashy enough. So I added mushrooms. Red mushrooms release sleep spores when shaken. I picked 20 with weightless strap keeping the stems from trembling, stuffed them into copied pouches, and hung those pouches above the hidden killers' heads. Laughing Seam made them settle like harmless fruit. Then I used Silent Buckle to climb into the branches above their leader and waited. Ashford's harvest team entered the field. Grace walked at the front. Owen guarded the snack plants with the intensity of a knight protecting a sacred relic. Harper stayed near the crates, crossbow ready, eyes scanning for the kind of problem that looked expensive. The hidden killers raised their darts. I dropped a single bronze bell. It landed on the leader's head with a clear, beautiful ding. He flinched and fired early. His dart hit the trigger line I had moved. The net behind him snapped upward, wrapped his own group, and yanked them into a tree. The mushroom pouches burst. Red spores exploded around them. 3 more traps triggered as they kicked, catching legs, arms, weapons, and one very unfortunate ponytail. From the field, the harvest team saw 6 criminals suddenly cocoon themselves in nets and fall asleep while hanging upside down. Owen stared. Grace did not even look surprised. Harper lowered her crossbow, efficient. I was not done. 2 killers outside the trap line panicked and ran toward the field. I took off my belt directly in front of them. They skidded to a stop. I held up 1 red mushroom. Boo, I said. They turned and fled straight into the silver wheat. The wheat was not wheat. It was a field monster that hated fast movement. Silver stalks wrapped their ankles, lifted them upside down, and shook them until every stolen pouch, weapon, coin, and bad decision fell out. Grace walked over and tapped the stalks with her spear, stunning the monster long enough to free them once guards arrived. The harvest succeeded. We collected enough food, herbs, repair crystals, and metal flowers to supply the final climb. We also collected 8 bound player killers, 2 stolen maps, and 1 extremely angry field monster seed that Owen wanted to plant near Trevor's cell. No one let him. The whole region had started using one phrase when something impossible happened to cruel people. They said they got emptied. A thief tried to steal a potion and ended up in a barrel, emptied. A bully swung at a weaker player and hit his own supply cart, emptied. A monster chased a cloak full of onions off a cliff, emptied with seasoning. I pretended to hate the phrase. Secretly, I loved it. But fame had weight, even when people could not look at me. That night, I sat on Ashford's wall with the belt off, letting the wind hit my face like a normal person. Below, players packed supplies. Guards moved criminals into reinforced cells. The beacon boxes pulsed calmly. Harper's forge glowed. Owen was attempting to juggle 3 black hook chitin plates and 1 loaf of bread. Grace stood near the gate, speaking quietly to a group of frightened newcomers. They were asking about me. I could tell by how they kept glancing up at the wall, then looking embarrassed when I waved. A week ago, those same people would have laughed at my belt. Now they wanted proof that the empty player was real. That scared me more. Mockery is simple. You survive it out of spite. Respect is heavier. People place hope in your hands, and suddenly dropping it becomes another way to hurt them. I tightened the belt again and let myself vanish. Comfortable fit hugged my waist. The world forgot to look at me. I whispered to the night, "Do not make me responsible for everybody." The night, being rude, did not answer. Grace did. "You already are," she said from 3 steps away. I jumped so hard I nearly fell off the wall. She had learned to find me by listening for the exact place silence was trying too hard. "That is cheating," I said. "You taught everyone to watch for what is missing." Terrible lesson, very inconvenient for me. She leaned beside me. For a while neither of us said anything. Down in the square, Owen dropped the bread, caught the chitin, and celebrated like the bread had betrayed him first. Grace finally said, "The final climb will not be like the other floors." I know. You cannot solve everything alone. I know. She looked at the empty space where my face should have been. Do you believe it? I wanted to make a joke. I had many good ones, defensive ones that would have let the conversation slide away. But the truth was standing right there, sharper than her spear. At the start, being unseen had made me powerful because nobody expected anything from me. I could fail in private, win in secret, laugh while cowards punished themselves. But now every invisible step had visible consequences. People were copying my tricks, criminals were afraid of my name. Ashford was preparing for the final climb with bags of flour and decoy cloaks because I had turned ridiculous survival into a strategy. I did not have an army. I had something worse. Influence. I believe I can make their lives harder, I said. Grace smiled faintly. The monsters. The monsters, the murderers, the arrogant sword models, anyone who looks at a weak person and sees free loot. That is enough. Maybe it was. Maybe it had to be. The final morning began with rain that never touched the ground. Drops fell from the sky and stopped 6 inches above the streets, trembling in midair like the world was holding its breath. Every drop reflected a different piece of Ashford, the wall, the tower, the forge. The fountain, faces of players looking up. For one stupid second, I worried they were mirrors, then remembered we were not doing that kind of enemy and relaxed. The rain was only a timer. Each floating drop turned black one by one. When the last drop darkened, the 5 days would be over. We had hours. The climb team gathered at the Sky Needle gate. Grace led the main fighters. Owen stood beside her with 2 new clubs reinforced by black hook chitin because progress had defeated me. Harper carried a pack full of devices that clanked when she breathed. I wore the plain belt under a patched coat, its brown leather now reinforced with black strips, silver stitches, and one buckle that looked like it had bitten 3 enemies and enjoyed it. People came to see us off. Not cheering at first. Just watching. The same way people watch a door during a storm, hoping it holds. A child stepped forward and offered me a small cloth pouch. I took off my belt so he could see my hand accept it. Inside were chalk sticks, buttons, string, and a single cookie wrapped in paper. "For traps," he said. My throat tried to close. Owen leaned over. "The cookie is the strongest item." The child nodded seriously. I tied the pouch to my belt. "Then I will save it for the final boss," I said. The child smiled like I had promised the sun would rise. I put the belt back on before my face betrayed me. The gate opened. We stepped into the tower. The first hidden danger of the final route was not a monster. It was a hallway full of applause. The sound erupted the moment we entered, thousands of invisible hands clapping from both sides. Players straightened instinctively, some smiled, some lifted weapons. The applause grew louder whenever anyone posed, louder whenever anyone imagined victory, louder whenever pride rose in the chest. Then the floor opened under the proudest player in the front line. Grace grabbed his collar before he fell. The applause booed. I understood immediately and hated how accurate it was. The hallway fed on performance. If you wanted to look heroic, it killed you. If you wanted attention, it marked you. If you wanted applause, the floor gave you a standing ovation straight into spikes. My belt purred like it had found a favorite room. I moved through the hallway invisible, but the applause still tested the others. Every few steps, a player would stand taller, hear the clapping rise, and nearly trigger a trap. I opened pocket loop and pulled out the child's buttons, double-tuck copied them until I had handfuls, then I rolled buttons along the floor ahead of us. The applause followed the rolling buttons. Tiny clicks became tiny performers. The hallway clapped for buttons while the team crouched, crawled, and shuffled like embarrassed crabs. Owen had the hardest time because his soul was 90% performance. Grace made him bite a strap so he could not shout. Harper would have been proud. At the end, the applause gathered into a floating mask with smiling cheeks and knives for eyelashes. It bowed to us, waiting for a dramatic attack. Nobody moved. It bowed lower. Still nobody. I walked behind it, placed the child's cookie on the floor, and used laughing seam. The cookie settled with such natural importance that the mask turned toward it. The applause thundered. The floor opened under the cookie. The mask dove after its audience. The spikes below destroyed it. Owen removed the strap from his mouth. That cookie died a hero. I saluted the whole. Then we kept climbing. The next chamber was full of suspended cages, each holding equipment from players who had died before us. Swords, rings, cloaks, shields, boots, all hanging in crystal bars. Their powers leaked into the air, creating zones of random danger. One patch made gravity tilt sideways. Another made flames fall upward. Another made everyone's hair float in a direction hair should not know about. At the center, a key hung from a chain. Obviously trapped. We nutted it anyway. A sword user tried to cut the cages. The moment his blade touched crystal, every weapon inside screamed with stored resentment. The cages shook. The power zones expanded. Gravity flipped one player onto the ceiling. Owen waved at him like this happened often. I studied the chain holding the key. It was not protected by strength. It was protected by attention. Every weapon in every cage watched the key with the jealous focus of abandoned tools. If anyone reached for it, the equipment attacked. So I made the key boring. Forgotten waste did not work on objects directly, but it worked on recent importance. I circled the cages, whispering to the weapons like they were nervous dogs. Not your key. Nothing special. Just metal. Look, that shield is shinier. At the same time, I used double tuck to copy scraps of metal from Harper's pack and scattered them through the air. Laughing seam made each scrap glint just right. The trapped weapons shifted focus. A lightning sword stared at a nail. A magic ring pulsed at a washer. A cloak tried to smother a spoon. The kai's chain loosened. Grace moved only when I tapped her wrist. She threw her spear without looking at the key. The spear struck the wall behind it, bounced, clipped the chain, and sent the key falling. I caught it in pocket loop before any weapon remembered caring. The cage chamber cleared. The player on the ceiling asked if someone could help him down. Owen said, "Have you tried apologizing to gravity?" Gravity answered by turning off sideways mode. The player fell into a pile of cloaks. No one was seriously hurt, so it was comedy. The key opened a stairwell that spiraled around the outside of the tower. There, the rain floated beside us, black drops hanging in the air beyond the railing. Each drop showed Ashford below. Monsters gathered at distant fields. Beacon boxes pulsed. Guards watched the walls. Trevor's crystal cell stood in the yard like a warning. For a second, I saw him inside the drop. He was awake. He was smiling. Not because he had escaped, not because he had power, because some people enjoy storms even when they are trapped indoors. I looked away. There were bigger things above us. The stairwell shook. A massive hand reached over the railing from outside the tower. It was made of cloud and bone, with long fingers that scraped stone. Then another hand appeared. Then a head rose from the black rain, blind and wide-mouthed. A sky crawler. Not the final calamity, just one of the things circling the upper tower, waiting for climbers to become tired enough to grab. The fighters formed a line. Grace's spear flashed. Owen planted himself near the middle with both clubs ready. The crawler opened its mouth and inhaled. Wind pulled at everyone. The sky crawler did not need to see me. It was trying to eat the staircase. I grabbed the railing, felt my boots lift, and made a very intelligent sound that Silent Buckle respectfully deleted. The crawler sucked harder. Loose stones flew into its mouth. A player lost his shield. A supply bag ripped open, spilling ropes and flour packets into the air. Flour, my oldest friend. I let go of the railing. Grace shouted my name, but the wind swallowed it. I flew toward the crawler's mouth, invisible, silent, and deeply unhappy. At the last second, I opened pocket loop and dumped everything light I had left. Flour, chalk dust, feathers, shadow strips, buttons, torn cloaks, the child's string, copied laces. All of it exploded into the crawler's inhaling throat. Then I activated Laughing Seam. Every tiny object settled into the airflow like it belonged there. The crawler inhaled a complete disaster. Its throat clogged with meaningful trash. It coughed. The wind reversed. I shot back out like a human spitball. Owen caught my ankle. This sounds heroic. He actually caught my ankle, spun in a full circle, and slammed me onto the staircase like he was finishing a wrestling move. It hurt, but it kept me from flying into the rain. Grace used the opening. Her spear pierced the crawler's lower jaw. The lightning tassel from the optional path flashed. Every player on the stairwell attacked the jaw joint, not with pride, but with teamwork so messy and desperate it became beautiful. The crawler tried to pull away. I rolled under its fingers, touched the cloudbone knuckle, and used nobody's claim. The finger forgot the hand. It detached. Owen hit it with both clubs and launched it into the crawler's eye socket. The sky crawler fell backward into the black rain, coughing chalk feathers until it vanished below the clouds. A reward message flickered. Upper route cleared. Ascent speed increased. I lay on the stairwell, staring at the sky. Owen leaned over me. You flew. I was inhaled. Style points. Pain points. Grace helped me up without smiling, but her eyes betrayed her. We climbed higher. Now the team understood the rhythm. Direct power opened wounds. Trickery opened fights. Mercy kept people human. Consequences kept evil people nervous. And me. I was becoming less like a ghost and more like the space between every moving part. When a trap arrow fired, I was the missing inch that made it hit a monster. When a boss prepared a roar, I was the flower in its throat. When a cruel player reached for someone weaker, I was the invisible hand moving the punishment closer. I did not want to be seen all the time, but I wanted the results to be impossible to ignore. The last chamber before floor 26 was a storage vault for broken banners. Hundreds of old cloth flags hung from the ceiling, each one marked with symbols from groups that must have climbed before the apocalypse brought us here. Some were burned, some were frozen, some dripped black water. The banners whispered, not in words but in feelings. Give up. You are late. Others failed stronger. Your city is small. Your weapon is a joke. That last one felt personal. Whispers did not attack the strongest players first. They attacked the tired ones, the ones who had survived by luck, by help, by running at the right time. A young sword user dropped to one knee shaking. A ring caster covered her ears. Even Owen's smile flickered. Grace held firm, but I saw her grip tighten until her knuckles went white. I could not punch a whisper, but I could answer it. I took off my belt. Everyone saw me step into the center of the hanging banners. The whispers turned sharper. Plain belt. Weak choice. Lucky coward. I left. Not loudly, not bravely, honestly. You are using old material, I said. The banners rustled. I reached into pocket loop and pulled out a copied brown strap, then another, Double tuck flashed over and over until straps covered the floor around me. Plain, ugly, boring, comfortable. I tied them to the broken banners one by one while the whispers hissed. This one beat a burrow boss with a loose headpiece. I tied a strap. This one turned player killers into hanging mushrooms. Another strap. This one helped stop a rumor crystal with basic questions. Another. This one made a centipede tie itself into a knot. Another. This one convinced a hallway to kill a cookie. Owen raised one hand weakly. Hero cookie. Hero cookie, I corrected. The players started laughing. The banners hated laughter. Fear wants silence, shame wants privacy, mockery wants you alone, but I had been mocked from the first minute of the apocalypse, and every insult had become material, every joke had become a tool. Every person who doubted me had handed me practice. The copied belts tightened around the banners. Laughing seam activated across all of them at once. The room decided the plain straps belonged there. The broken banners stopped whispering. Then one by one they wrapped around themselves, tied into knots, and dropped from the ceiling like defeated laundry. The chamber cleared. A message appeared only for me. Tidal resonance increased. The empty player recognition expanded. Unseen authority strengthened when acting against hostile attention. I put the belt back on. The team saw me vanish, but for once nobody looked confused. They looked ready. That was when the true final climb opened above us. The final climb became brutal. Floor 26 covered itself in ice that reflected sound. Silent buckle helped, but every step made cold light ripple. I solved it by duplicating strips of cloth and laying a path for the whole team, turning a deadly ice maze into the world's ugliest carpet. Floor 27 had statues that only moved when praised. The players kept accidentally complimenting their craft because the statues were genuinely impressive. I walked around whispering insults, so specific the statues cracked from emotional damage. Floor 28 was a furnace with fire fish swimming through the air. I used nobody's claim on their favorite lava rocks and moved them into a circle, convincing the fish they owned the wrong territory. They fought over it while we climbed the walls. Floor 29 was quiet. Too quiet. No monsters, no traps, just a long staircase under a dark sky leading to the top platform. That was worse than noise. Noise tells you where to be afraid. Halfway up, the staircase began removing memories. Not all at once, just tiny things. Player forgot why he was holding a shield. Another forgot which direction was up and almost stepped off. Owen forgot the word for club and called it a friendship stick. Grace forgot my name for 3 seconds and looked horrified when it returned. Forgotten waste protected me from being remembered, not from forgetting. The staircase was attacking identity itself. I tightened the belt and felt it answer with heat. People can survive losing facts. They cannot survive losing purpose. So I gave them purpose too simple to steal. I took off the belt, stood on the stairs where everyone could see me, and pointed upward. Follow the plain belt. That was it. No speech, no history, no dramatic promise. Just one ugly brown belt in front of a group of exhausted players. When the stairs stole names, they still knew to follow the belt. When they forgot fear, they followed. When they forgot pride, they followed. When I forgot my own name for one cold second, I looked down at the belt around my waist and remembered enough. Comfortable fit. The stupid description that started everything. I laughed so hard the memory fog cracked around me. The staircase hated that. It could steal names, plans, and directions, but it did not know what to do with a man laughing at his own dumb equipment choice. We reached the top. The final platform was wider than Ashford's town square, floating above the clouds. In the center stood the city anchor, a crystal pillar wrapped in silver vines. Behind it slept the calamity. Not a dragon. Not a demon king. Something worse. A giant hollow figure made of old battlefields, broken weapons, and empty helmets, with a heart of black storm crystal. It was called the Carrion Colossus, and it woke the moment we stepped onto the platform. Its body unfolded from the clouds. Thousands of weapons hung from it like feathers. Swords, spears, axes, bows, shields, rings, broken armor, all the things people thought made them strong. Its face was a smooth metal plate with no eyes, no mouth, only dents from wars it had eaten. The city anchor glowed behind it. Claim it and Ashford would be safe. Fail and the Colossus would descend. Every fighter charged, because what else do you do when the final monster stands between you and home? Their attacks vanished into the weapons on its body. Legendary swords stuck and were absorbed. Spells broke against old shields. Grace's spear pierced its arm, and the arm simply added the wound to its collection. Owen hit its foot and lost one club inside a pile of rusted blades. The Colossus did not roar. It did not need to. It raised one hand, and every abandoned weapon on the platform lifted into the air. Then it fired them at us. I moved without thinking. Pocket loop opened, double tuck flashed. Nobody's claim spread across loose weapons as I touched them one by one, stealing their ownership from the monster for a heartbeat. Swords fell from the air. Spears turned sideways, shields dropped like dead birds. I could not stop all of them, but I stopped enough. Players survived by inches again. Grace reached me, bleeding from the forehead. Can you reach the anchor? I looked past the Colossus. The anchor glowed only 30 yards away. 30 yards through a storm of dead weapons and a monster that collected violence. Probably, I said. Owen staggered over, holding half a club. That means yes in Jonah language. The plan was simple. They would distract the Colossus. I would claim the anchor. Simple plans are lies with good posture. The moment I put on the belt and moved, the Colossus turned. No eyes, no senses I understood, but the black storm crystal in its chest pulsed, and every weapon on its body pointed toward the empty space where I stood. It did not see me. It noticed that the world did not. Unseen authority reduced tracking. The Colossus was too vast to care. A wall of blades flew at me. I used blind spot step into the shadow of a falling shield, then into the ignored gap beneath a spear, then behind a broken helmet spinning through the air. Each step burned through my stamina. Each heartbeat was a coin tossed between genius and death. Halfway to the anchor, a chain wrapped around my ankle. Not Trevor's older, rusted, part of the Colossus. It dragged me backward. I hit the stone hard, the belt almost snapped open. My visibility flickered. The whole platform saw me for 1 second, sliding across the floor toward the Colossus's weapon-covered body. The monster lifted me into the air. For the first time since the beginning, I was not hidden, not clever, not controlling the scene. I was bait on a hook. The Colossus pulled me close to its blank face. Behind me, Grace shouted. Owen ran. Other players attacked its legs, but the weapons on its body absorbed everything. I looked at all those legendary weapons stuck in it. All those glowing swords. Dragon shields. Magic rings. Flame cloaks. Holy armors. Every item people had fought over in the White Room, or something like them, collected on one monster like trophies. And there I was, held by a rusty chain, wearing the plainest belt in the apocalypse. I started laughing. Not because it was funny. Because I finally understood the fight. The Colossus did not collect people. It collected attention. Every famous weapon, every dramatic attack, every glowing piece of power became part of it. The more impressive something looked, the faster it was absorbed. My belt had survived because it looked worthless. The monster was a graveyard for legends. So I gave it garbage. All of it. Pocket loop opened wider than ever before. I dumped everything. Rope, onions, empty bottles, bent nails, cracked hinges, old shoes, chalk dust, feather bundles, soap bars, fake ration boxes, iron hooks, broken bell clappers, flour sacks, wire clips, spare straps. Cursed theater props, jars, hinges from the door maze, and one angry frog I still refused to explain. Then I used double tuck. Not once. Again and again. Belt heated until it burned my waist. Copies exploded outward in every direction. The sky filled with junk, not weapons, not legends, not glory, just ridiculous, ignored, ordinary things multiplied into a storm. The Colossus froze. Its body did not know what to absorb. A sword had meaning. A shield had meaning. A holy ring had meaning. But 600 duplicated onions and a rain of left shoes. The monster hesitated. That hesitation was mine. Nobody's claim spread through the chain around my ankle. It forgot the Colossus. I slipped free, fell, and used blind spot step into the shadow of a falling flour sack. Grace saw the opening. She did not attack the Colossus. She attacked the city anchor's silver vines, cutting the outer locks. Owen grabbed a duplicated rope and swung from a flying shield, crashing into the Colossus's knee with both feet. It should not have worked. It worked because the knee was distracted by an onion rolling into a helmet. Players realized what was happening. They stopped using their flashiest skills. They threw rocks, boots, broken wood, cooking pots. Someone hurled a chair from a rest platform. Ordinary objects battered the legendary graveyard, and for the first time, the carrion Colossus stepped back. I reached the anchor. It was taller than me, warm and bright, humming with power. A prompt appeared. Claim city anchor. I reached out. The Colossus moved. Its chest opened, revealing the black storm heart, the same crystal energy that had twisted Trevor. A beam of dark lightning formed, aimed not at me but at the anchor. If it could not own the city, it would destroy the prize. I had 1 second. 1 second from laughing seam. One ignored object. One stupid idea. I pulled off my belt. The world saw me. The Colossus saw me. The system saw me. Every player on the platform saw the empty player standing beside the city anchor, holding the plain brown belt that had fooled towns, dungeons, killers, bosses, and fate itself. Then I threw the belt into the beam. For half a breath, I was completely visible and completely powerless. The beam struck the belt. Comfortable fit. That dumb little description flared brighter than the sun. The belt did not block the attack like a shield. It did something much worse. It made the beam unimportant. Black lightning lost attention. Its glow dimmed. Its direction wavered. Its own power forgot why it mattered. It slid off the belt, curled around the anchor, and faded into harmless sparks. I grabbed the belt as it fell, snapped it around my waist, and slammed my hand onto the anchor. Claim accepted. Ashford city anchor secured. The crystal pillar erupted with silver light. The light did not blast the Colossus. It ignored the Colossus. And that destroyed it. The carrion Colossus was made of stolen attention, legendary weapons, and the fear people gave to visible power. When the anchor's light refused to acknowledge it, the monster began to come apart. Weapons fell from its body, swords clattered, shields cracked, rings went dark, flame cloaks burned out, holy armor folded like empty cans. The Colossus reached for me one last time. I stepped forward, visible by choice. Not because I needed to be seen. Because it needed to know who bite it. I touched its blank face and activated nobody's claim. For one heartbeat, the monster owned nothing. Not the weapons, Not the storm. Not the fear. Not even itself. It collapsed into a rain of rust and black dust, falling through the clouds before it ever reached the world below. The platform went silent. Then Owen started cheering so loudly, I thought the tower would file a complaint. Grace sat down like her bones had resigned. Players laughed, cried, hugged, and stared at the space where the monster had been. The city anchor's light shot downward, piercing the clouds, racing along the tower, spreading across the forest, the roads, the farms, the quarry, the bridge, and finally Ashford. Far below, the safe zone expanded. Walls of silver light rose around the outer fields. Watchtowers repaired themselves. The roads shone with protection marks. The town became a city not because someone gave a speech, but because a bunch of exhausted people climbed a nightmare tower and threw enough garbage at a god of weapons to make it confused. The reward window appeared. Final contribution calculated. Most valuable player, Jonah. No unknowns. No blank. My name stayed. For a second, I did not breathe. Then the ranking board appeared in the air above the platform, visible to everyone in the region. Rank 1, Jonah. Starter equipment, plain belt. Title acquired, the empty player. Owen pointed at the words and laughed until he almost fell over the edge. Grace smiled like she had been waiting for the board to admit what she already knew. Somewhere far below, I knew Harper was probably pretending not to be impressed while preparing to charge me for repairs. I should have felt proud. I did. But I also felt strange. For so long I had won by being unseen. Now the whole region knew my name. The joke had become a warning. The warning had become a title. The title had become a target. That night Ashford celebrated. No, not Ashford. The city did not have a new name yet, and thankfully nobody asked me to pick one. My naming history included Onion, Tornado, and Friendship Stick, so that was for the best. Lanterns floated over the streets. Players returned from the tower with stories that made no sense unless you had lived them. A child asked if I really beat the final monster with a belt. I told him no. Then Owen shouted from across the square, he beat it with trash first. The child looked at me with pure wonder. I said fine, but it was high-quality trash. Harper repaired the belt in her forge after the celebration. The leather had black burn marks from the Colossus beam. The buckle had a crack. The laughing seam twitched whenever anyone said onion. She worked in silence for a long time, then handed it back. It is uglier now, she said. Is that bad? No, it suits you. From Harper, that was a hug. Grace found me on the city wall before dawn. The expanded safe zone shimmered across the fields. Roads that had been death traps yesterday now glowed with anchor light. In the distance, the Sky Needle still stood, quiet and empty, its top lost in clouds. You could lead people now, she said. I looked at her. That sounds terrible. It usually is. Then why mention it? Because they will follow whether you want them to or not. I leaned on the wall. Below, Owen was trying to teach new players how to dodge by throwing turnips at them. Harper's forge chimney smoked. Guards changed shifts near the jail. Trevor's crystal cell sat in the center of a reinforced yard, visible to everyone, empty of myth. He was still alive, still angry, still powerless behind the light. For once, the city felt like it could breathe. I wanted that to be enough. The system waited until sunrise to ruin my peace. A black window opened above the horizon, far beyond the protected roads, where the land dipped into a valley none of us had explored. New region discovered, the silent expanse. Anchor signal received. Distant gates awakening. I stared at the words. Grace stood beside me, reading silently. Owen shouted from below, is that good or bad? Harper stepped out of the forge, hammer in hand, eyes narrowed toward the valley. The belt tightened around my waist by itself. Comfortable. Ready. Annoyingly dramatic. I put one hand on the buckle and smiled. Everyone had picked legendary weapons because they wanted to be seen. I had picked a plain belt because there was nothing else left. Now entire gates were waking up because our city had become a light in a dark world, and somewhere out there, bigger monsters, crueler players, and dumber opportunities were waiting. I looked at the valley, then at the city behind me. I had no throne, no army, no glowing sword. Just a belt, a bad habit of standing where evil people least wanted me, and a talent for turning their own cruelty into the trap that swallowed them. So when the first distant gate flashed red on the horizon, I did not run from it. I tightened the plain brown belt until the buckle clicked. Then I disappeared.